Yep. I guess we're starting. Hold on. Hold on. Oh, what the hell? Let's start. How y'all doing? So we've got a evening stream. Mix things up a little bit. Welcome to another Healthy Gamer GG stream. My name is Alok Kanoja. Just a reminder that although I'm a psychiatrist, nothing we discuss on stream today is intended to be taken as medical advice, and everything is intended to be for educational or entertainment purposes only. If y'all have a medical concern or question, please go see a licensed professional. So, yeah. So, hope y'all are doing well. Late stream, yeah. So we decided to mix it up a little bit. So I don't know if y'all know this, but back in the day, I used to actually stream at like, I want to say around this time. So back when Healthy Gamer was in its infancy, I was still a full-time clinician at the time. So I was like a, fully practicing physician. And so I would see like patients until like 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. or sometimes even 7 p.m. And then like I would finish working a full day and I would stream for a couple of hours. And, that was fun. It was like a different crowd, slightly different vibe, like a little bit, less. I was exhausted because I'd been working all day. It's 7 o'clock where I am. So I'm in Central Standard Time. But yeah. Yeah. So, and then at some point, this became like a real thing. So at first it was like Healthy Gamer was a side hustle. And then it kind of became a real thing. And then as it became a real thing, we started to actually stream earlier. And part of the reason we streamed earlier is because actually half of our audience is about half is from the EU. And so even like some people from like the Philippines and stuff like that would tune in. So it was like, it seems like the noon to 2 time, people on the West Coast could still catch us. And then like people on the East Coast would catch us. People would sometimes tune in around lunch. And then, EU folks could catch us as well. So, but it's been, so I took yesterday off because it was Independence Day here in the United States. So July 4th happened, and I was also a little bit under the weather. And so the other thing I'm looking forward to today is we're going to do a much longer meditation. So we've skipped meditation several times over the last couple of weeks because I've been sick, and basically I've been sick, one thing after the other. And so we're going to cover a couple of things. It's going to be a little bit more chill. We're going to be vibing. We're going to be hanging out together in the evening. And we're still streaming tomorrow, or we're planning on streaming tomorrow during the regular time. So I'll be back here in less than 24 hours. So like in a day and a half, 18 hours or so, we're going to stream again. So we'll be able to do like sort of an evening kind of wind down, longer meditation. Try to make it up to all y'all that are super interested in meditation. We haven't been able to. We've been sort of running a little bit long, and I've been sick, so I apologize for that. So yeah. It's 2 a.m. Well, stick around for a couple of, you should probably go to bed, but if you stick around for a couple of hours, we're going to do like a sleep-oriented meditation. EU gang. Yeah. So we've got a couple of things that we're going to talk about today. I'm considering meditation, but it's hard. And yeah, it certainly can be. So I think that's challenging, but I think a lot of, let's talk about why meditation is hard. Okay. Already. This is the other thing that I have done over the last 5 days. So I've given up caffeine for the now 5th time in the last 18 months. I keep on giving it up and then eventually bouncing back, basically relapsing. One, because I love coffee and tea a lot, but secondly, because sometimes I have to work and one of my kids is sick at night. And so I'll be up all night and then got to stream the next day and stuff like that. So that's challenging. But falling asleep on stream incoming. Yeah. We're going to do sleeping stream today with Dr. K. Drink mate? Yeah, I'm pretty sure mate has caffeine. Right? Yerba mate. People talk about this compound called, what is it, matine? But isn't it just caffeine? Doesn't it have caffeine in it? I thought the chemical compound was basically caffeine. Yeah, so for people who find meditation hard work because the mind doesn't like the discipline, you're doing it very well. So remember that meditation, every time you bring the mind back to your focus, that's like doing a push-up. So the more that your mind fights you, the more swole you're actually getting. So keep at it, and then eventually it'll get easier. The other thing to consider is that if you struggle with meditation, you can also try different techniques. So that's why we sometimes will do things like physical meditations or inquisitive meditations. Oftentimes using the right indriya or sense organ will make things a lot easier. So for example, doing a yantra meditation or some kind of balancing meditation or something like that is like really can help a lot. Yeah. All right. Should we get started? Okay. So I guess I can't continue watching the notes, alas. All right, so we've got 3 things to cover today. First one is, don't worry, someone else makes a mistake. Don't worry, buddy. It's not a big deal. We can fix this. We'll figure it out. And then you make a mistake, and then someone else, you're like, oh yeah, this is fixable. But when you yourself make the mistake, you're irredeemably worthless and a piece of garbage. So why do we treat people differently from ourselves? Like, what's up with that, right? We know we do that. We don't always do it in this way. So sometimes if we're narcissistic, we'll give ourselves the benefit of the doubt and we'll sort of have a double standard with other people, but we'll also do this to ourselves in terms of beating ourselves up and like a lack of self-compassion. So what goes on with this degree of self-talk? Next thing, how to not be miserable at job. So I love this post because originally I was going to pass on it because I was looking at this and I was like, this is super short. Like, I don't have enough to help this person, or I don't have enough to sort of formulate an answer, because it's like so simple, right? It's like, they're like, I don't like my job. How do I stop being miserable? And then I paused for a second and I was like, you know what? Instead of going into a lot of detail with a specific scenario, how about we just go over some basic like ideas about how to not be miserable at your job? And even though it'll be sort of general advice, I think it'll be it won't be very deep, but it'll be widely applicable. And it may not fit for everyone, but I think like there's actually a lot of like basic stuff, because we don't actually teach people. It's kind of weird. We don't teach people how to enjoy their job. Isn't that weird? There's just sort of this assumption that you're not supposed to like your job. And there's nothing you can do to like make it a more enjoyable experience. We're focused on how to do your job better, but we don't really focus on like teaching people like, okay, how you can actually enjoy your job more. So we're going to teach some of that to y'all today. There's another post that I thought was really good, which is, I don't see any masculinity within myself. So there's a post about a 20-year-old who is concerned about their lack of masculinity and also what that sort of means about their dating prospects. So we're going to talk a little bit about confidence and dating, and kind of like go into some nuts and bolts about where that kind of stuff comes from. Yeah, so let's start with this. So Yep. Okay. So, how to not be miserable at job. Just entering the workforce and all, and it's hard not working these random odd jobs I don't enjoy whatsoever. The current job I'm working at, I absolutely despise. I know plenty of people there who make it worthwhile. I always work my hardest to get done, so at the end of the day, I feel like I have achieved something. But I still can't help but feeling miserable. Does anyone have any tips on how to tolerate the job better? So like I said a minute ago, originally I wasn't going to pick this post because I thought that, okay, this is like so general. We don't know anything about where this person is working. We don't really know, like, you know, what their work situation is. We don't know anything about their colleagues. We don't know anything about their upbringing. We don't know anything about anything. They're like, I started working recently. I don't enjoy it. Anyone have tips? And so it occurred to me, though, that like we actually don't need all of that information. Like if we get a general question, we can actually answer in a general way, right? So what I'd love to do today is actually share with y'all some information, like general information about how to not be miserable at your job. So everything that we're going to talk about today it may not apply to everyone, right? So the more you relate to this, maybe some stuff will stick, some stuff won't, which is actually okay. But it's kind of interesting because we as a society don't really teach people how to enjoy their work. We don't teach people what is the nature of happiness. We don't teach people what is the nature of enjoyment. We don't teach people what is the nature of contentment, what is the nature of suffering. And the cool thing is that if we sort of like, I don't know if this makes sense, but we always kind of assume that the suffering is within the job, right? That like, oh, like you just keep on randomly like moving jobs until you find the right one that you enjoy. And once you find the right job, then you'll be happy. That's true to a certain extent, but like we don't really teach people, okay, how do you go about finding the right job? How do you go about actually like enjoying your job? Is there any component in the person-job relationship that actually like, is it just the job or is there any part of that that comes from you? And I think as we kind of tunnel down into that, we're going to learn a little bit about how to be not miserable at our job. Because it's tricky, right? So like this person is entering the workforce and like working these random odd jobs. And you could be in the same kind of situation where it's like you don't have a career yet, but you're just like kind of randomly working jobs and you're kind of miserable. And so what you do is you move from like job to job to job. You're like, this job sucks. And then you go to the next job and you're like, that job sucks. You go to the next job and you're like, that job sucks. And you go from sucky job to sucky job to sucky job. And at the end of the day, like, you don't, like, it just all sucks. So like, what do you do in that situation? Is this the kind of thing where you have to become like an inner Zen master and you have to like learn how to tolerate your job? Is it like finding the right job? Is it like learning detachment? Like what do we do here? Okay. So the other thing is in terms of the Zen stuff, what some people may think is that at some point what I'm going to do is share with them some kind of like secret detachment technique. I'm going to be like, oh, like learn to detach. If you detach and you understand the nature of happiness, right, what I just said, if you learn this secret technique, this secret jutsu, then you will enjoy the job. And so the tricky thing also happens where if we sort of assume that, right? If I say, okay, there is a component that's you, then it kind of like, it doubles your misery because you're like, oh, like look at all these other people able to enjoy jobs. It's not the job, it's me. I'm the idiot that doesn't know how to do the job. I can't detach enough. I don't know how to squeeze water out of a stone. Idiot me. And so there's a funny thing here where there is a personal component, but unless we're careful, we'll slip into some amount of self-blame, right? And like this is something the boomer generation will sort of say. They'll be like, you know, I don't know why you're complaining. Back in my day, we had to walk 5 miles in the snow to take out the trash and this and that and all this kind of stuff. They're like, we don't know why you're complaining. And so it's kind of tricky because this is like, is this the problem in you or is this the problem in the job? And if you sort of adopt this idea that like, oh, if I detach myself enough, then like, oh, I'll be fine. Then it's like a personal deficiency. And then you're like, oh, like, you know, I guess I'm bad at this. But like, what if the job is just bad, right? What if it isn't a personal deficiency? So navigating this kind of stuff. And at the end of the day, if the situation is like, I'm miserable at my job, what do I do about it? Does anyone have tips? It turns out that we do have tips. Okay. So First thing that we've got to understand is where misery comes from, okay? So if we understand like what the nature of misery is, and we understand what we will like about our job, what we won't like about our job, as we start to tunnel down into the relationship between me and my job, we'll start to really get a good sense of like how to be less miserable at the job. So oftentimes what people will do is they'll move from job to job to job, and they'll kind of like do it randomly, right? I don't like this job. Therefore, I'm going to let me try something else. Like even if we look at this post for a second, what this person is saying is, I absolutely despise this job. So they're going to look for anything else. The problem is that when you jump to anything else, your ship is sinking. So without really thinking about it, you just jump to the next sinking ship. And then that ship is prone to sink as well. And then you're like, man, it's just sinking ships after sinking ships after sinking ships. So this is where we've got to be a little bit careful about what is the nature of misery in our job. What is it about the job that makes it miserable for us? So we've got to sort of understand that. So let's start with a couple of thoughts that people in miserable jobs have, and also sort of how to counter those thoughts, okay? So what we're going to do with y'all now is actually go through 7 different kind of tips to help you kind of manage a bad job, okay? So what we've got to do is understand what is the nature of misery and what makes us miserable in the job. And if we understand what makes us miserable, we can sort of start to understand how to move to the next job in a better way, okay? So the first thought that we tend to have when we're miserable is it'll last forever. So this is kind of interesting, right? So generally speaking, when human beings are suffering in some way, there's an assumption that pain will last forever. This is absolutely a cognitive bias. There's all kinds of studies that have been done on this kind of principle that shows that pain gives people a sense of infinite time. So when we're struggling, when we're feeling nauseous, it feels like this is going to last forever. So this kind of has an interesting effect when you're in a job situation, because if you're miserable at your job, and then if you think it's going to last forever, that's going to just go ahead and reinforce the misery, right? Whereas what I would kind of say is that the road to a good job is paved with crappy jobs. So the first thing to understand is that even if you have a bad job, first of all, it won't last forever. And also, if you pay attention properly, each crappy job that you have will actually set you up for a better job down the road, okay? So this is sort of like the price of tuition. So it's okay to notice this thought, to acknowledge this thought, and to think, okay, this is going to last forever. And as we'll show you down the road, like first of all, just acknowledge that you feel that way. That'll start to reduce the feeling a little bit, and then start to also recognize that this is sort of the price that you pay for eventually finding a good job. Because even if you are in a job that you don't enjoy, at least you now know some element of what you don't enjoy. So the next time you find a job, you know specifically the kinds of things not to look for, to avoid, actually, right? So if there are particular things that make you miserable. So related to this, when we're miserable, we have a second kind of thought. Second thought that we have is there is no point to this. So this is where we kind of think about this idea of a dead-end job. So when we're miserable, we don't see any point to the work we're doing. We're like, who on earth would value this on a resume? I don't understand, like, how this can help me in any way, shape, or form. This too is misery creates this thought. And then the more that we wallow in that thought, the more misery it creates. So what we've got to do is break both of these cycles to be less miserable at the job. How do we break these cycles? We start by becoming aware. And then we start to, hopefully, like as you become aware, like take a step back, do some kind of meditation technique, like decompress that emotion. And then what we want to do is start to like think critically about this. So don't think so black and white. Start to think in shades of gray. And then eventually, as we think critically about it, we can start to think constructively. And we'll get to what that means down in a minute. But when we sort of say there's no point, what we're going to also recognize is that this job is actually valuable experience. It's valuable experience for you because, once again, we're going to teach you this in a second. You can use this job to sort of figure out, okay, what is it that's actually making miserable, and how do I avoid this in the future? Because oftentimes what happens is as we just randomly move from job to job, we're not thinking critically about what did I dislike in this job that I should be careful about in the next job. You also see this in people who get into bad relationships over and over and over again. They're like, okay, this relationship sucks, so let me just like piece out of this. They ghost, but they don't even really think at all about, okay, what made that relationship bad? What was my contribution to that relationship? And so what we tend to see in relationships is people will get into the same cycles over and over and over again. Or it'll be same relationships over and over and over again. It'll become a cycle. And you'll see this a lot with people who are codependent too, right? So like I'm dependent, you're dependent, we're codependent together. We end up breaking up after a miserable 6 years, and I fall right back into a codependent relationship. So you have to have awareness of the cycle in order to break it. Then start to think critically about, okay, like, is there really no point to this? Like, why do I think there's no point to this? What do I do about it? And then what we're going to try to figure out is how there is a point to this. So this is valuable experience for a couple of reasons. You may say, okay, it's not valuable experience. Like, who cares that I was packing boxes for like 6 months? This looks great on a resume because you showed up every day for 6 months. And like, if you're interviewing with someone at a job and they're like, okay, what did you do? And you're like, yeah, I packed boxes for 6 months. And they're like, oh, that's interesting. Can you tell me, why are you leaving? And I found it boring. And they're like, oh, that's a weird thing to say during an interview. And you're like, yeah, I know. It's like, I didn't find it very intellectually engaging, but I told my boss that I would be there on time. So I showed up every day. And even though I found it boring, like I had committed to do it. So I did the best job that I could. I worked really hard. My bosses were super happy with me. I'm really looking for something that will reward my hard work and that I can find like a little bit more intellectually challenging. I'm a reliable person. I'll do work. If you tell me to do something, I'm going to do it. If I put my mind to it, I'm going to do a good job. That's what you can count on from me. Even saying something like that, if you've been doing menial labor for six months, like showing up every day and doing something is actually like a very, very valuable skill. Right? A lot of people, like, they don't even show up. Like, showing up is half the battle when it comes to a job. So there is valuable experience there. So this idea that there's no point and that this is a dead-end job, this is something that we've seen a lot in our career coaching program where, like, people think they have dead-end jobs, but even if you've worked retail for like a year or 18 months and there's no opportunity for growth, the fact that you've been a stable and consistent worker for 18 months is actually like a pretty big win. Right? You showed up. If you've been working in customer relations, you've been dealing with Karens and like all this other kind of stuff, right? Like you're dealing with all these like different people and you can say, yeah, I work well under pressure. I show up, I've opened, I've closed, I've gained increased responsibility. Like I'm reliable and I'm good at customer service, especially because the place that I worked, our products really weren't great. So people would complain a lot. And so I was kind of like, I had to manage people as they were complaining about stuff. So even a dead-end job that you don't think is valuable can actually be like incredibly valuable as long as you think critically and constructively about it. So third thing that we're going to talk about. So tips on misery. So this is just kind of a tip. So it may not get easier, but you'll get better at it. So if we remember this scenario, this person had recently entered the workforce. And this is something where human beings, like, the first time that you, let's say, shoot a basketball, you may think to yourself like, oh my God, like, I'm never going to be able to do this. Anytime you start something out, you think to yourself that you'll never be able to adapt, that it's way too hard. And like, you just think to yourself, I'll never be able to do it. Human beings are remarkably adaptable, right? So it's interesting. I learned this actually on my 3-month jail rotation where like these people are in jail and most people when they come to jail think I will never be able to survive jail. I won't be able to stay stuck within these 4 walls for 4 years. There's no way. There's no way. But human beings are incredibly adaptable. And even after a couple of months of despair and stuff like that, like most prisoners just adjust because that's what human beings do, right? So like there's all kinds of adjustment. I've worked with people who have had, physical injuries and disabilities, had things like legs amputated and stuff like that, and no one thinks that they're going to be able to adjust. Whereas the truth of the matter is that human beings are incredibly, incredibly adaptable. So if you're entering the job world and you're thinking to yourself, this is terrible, I hate it, I hate it, I hate it, I'm not saying that you should learn to love it. What I'm saying is it's a little bit okay because you will learn to adapt. We're not saying that you shouldn't strive for more. We're not saying that you shouldn't change your job. We're going to teach you all that kind of stuff too. But have a little bit of faith in yourself in the sense that it may not necessarily get easier, the job may not change, but you will get better at it. So have faith in yourself, it'll be okay. All right? Now we're going to get into a lot of the details. So the next thing that we need to do is diagnose our misery. So I don't mean like clinically, we're using that term to find out where your misery comes from. So what we're going to share with y'all is a few dimensions that you can look at that oftentimes contribute to misery, which we take for granted. The first is, do you work with people or not? Okay? So some people hate their job because they have to work with particular coworkers. Some people hate their job because they're like sitting in a back room and they're like packing boxes all day and there's not another soul in sight. So this is really important. Like, is part of your misery due to the kind of people that you work with, or the fact that there are people or aren't people? Because this is something huge that you could sort of select the next job based on. So if you're working in a back room and you want some kind of like, the like environment like the office where there are people and like inside jokes and y'all like go to the break room and like hang out a little bit and like the other kinds of like, petty office politics. Like if you want that kind of stuff, then you know to look for that next time around. So the next time when you're looking for a job, you're not going to take the first thing that comes along because you need to leave your job. You can start to think a little bit about, okay, do I want to work with people or not? Next thing to kind of think a little bit about is, what is the boss like? Is the boss hands-on? Most people may think, oh my God, hands-on boss, that sounds terrible. Other people, or is the boss like completely AFK? And what are you looking for? Are you looking for a boss that's going to sort of serve as a little bit more like a mentor, is going to help you when you're down? Because I've seen both of these. People may assume, okay, hands-on bosses, and it's kind of interesting because what you resonate with is going to be, will sort of tell you a lot. So if the idea of a hands-on boss is terrifying to you, chances are you want more autonomy at work. Okay? So when you're looking for a job, you can even ask people like, so can you tell me a little bit about what supervision, oversight, and learning processes? Am I going to be acting somewhat independently, or, do I work with a team, or like, what's the kind of environment? Because even in places like quote unquote dead end jobs, these can be very different. So are you working the late shift? Are you working the early shift? Or like, what's going on? Because they can be very, very different. So in one, the boss may work from 9 to 5. But place is open from like 4 to 10. And so do you want to overlap with the boss or not overlap with the boss? You can sort of adjust some of the things there. And if your boss is super AFK, and if you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. These are places where like some people may be terrified by a hands-on boss, but some people are terrified of an AFK boss. Where it's like, I kind of showed up. So I went to a conference recently, a youth mental health summit in California. And I was talking to someone who is a pediatric behavioral specialist, I think, something like that. So these people like worked for the state of California and would do like basically like do social work interventions, and they were like completely on their own. They go through a 2-day training, and then they just get sent out into the field, and they're like driving like you show up on day one of your job. It's a Monday. You sit in a classroom for 8 hours. You go home. You show up on Tuesday morning. You sit in a classroom for 8 hours. On day 3, they give you an address and they tell you, go here and help this person. And you're kind of like left with no oversight. So what kind of oversight or boss relationship do you want to find? Okay. Next thing because these are huge sources of misery. Third, I guess this is subtopics. Third thing that we're going to talk about in terms of sources of misery is variety versus consistency. So what do you want from your job? Do you want your job to be like different every day? And this is where, once again, if you're listening to this and you're like, who wouldn't want variety? Like, of course I want variety. Like, variety is the spice of life. Like, I don't want to do the same crap over and over and over and over and over again. So people who dislike variety or want less variety, they don't use the word variety to describe their job. The word that they use is chaos, because things are so disorganized. There's so much variety. There's no consistency. People are showing up at random times. People are leaving at random times. Stuff doesn't get done. Work doesn't get assigned. Like, nothing is organized at all. Right? So people who like variety won't consider that chaos. But someone who likes consistency, likes routine, look, I'm happy to work. I just want to show up on time. I want to do my job. I'm happy to do a good job at my job. I don't want to worry about all this other crap. I don't need to worry about all this other crap. You guys focus on that crap. I'm going to build my widgets because that's what I enjoy doing. So these are the kinds of dimensions that you need to think about. So like, what is it that makes you miserable at your job? Is it a particular coworker? Is it that your job is too regimented? Is it that your boss is AFK? Is it that your boss is not AFK? Is your boss micromanaging and also is like remoting into your computer and can control your mouse like a hacker? Do you like to work with people or do you like to not work with people? And these will make huge differences in terms of the misery of your job. So if you're leaving, then you need to think about these dimensions ahead of time instead of randomly going to another job, right? Oh, I didn't like working at Wendy's. Let me go try McDonald's. And then like you're at McDonald's for a while and you're like, okay, this sucks. And then maybe I don't like fast food. So you go work at a clothing store. But actually what you realize is like, I don't like working with people and doing the same crap over and over and over again. Okay? So you have to think about what makes you miserable at the job. And as you think about what makes you miserable at the job, think critically about it, then you can start to shape your future in a more positive way. Okay? Now, next thing. Diagnose your pleasure. So, even if you have the worst job on the planet, there's a decent chance that there's something about your job that you will like. There's something about your job that is actually okay. Maybe if you've got the worst job on the planet, there's nothing. Who knows? But generally speaking, even the worst job has some parts that are okay. So there's a very simple exercise that you can do to sort of figure out if I ask you this question and you're like, what do you like about your job? And you're like, absolutely nothing. I hate every single aspect of it. That, by the way, is this black and white thinking, right? Chances are that's going to really mess you up because if you can't even think critically and nuanced about your job, you can't even navigate towards the things that you actually enjoy in your job. And if you're blind to what you enjoy in your job, how on earth are you going to move in the right direction into finding the right career for yourself or finding the right job for yourself? And then what happens is you're going to get stuck in this cycle. So I understand that your initial reaction, totally fine. I don't like anything about my job. Totally fine. I'm so sorry to hear that. Let me ask you something. If I could remove 90% of your job, what's the 10% that you would keep? If I could get rid of 90% of what you do, what's the 10% that you would choose to do? Tell me why. Tell me a little bit about that. What makes you enjoy that? Because chances are, even the worst job, and I've had all kinds of jobs, okay? My first job was serving ice cream. I've built a photobioreactor at a biofuel startup. I've worked as a clinician, obviously, like as a doctor. I've done research at like 3 different institutions, 1 in India, 2 in the United States. I've been a camp counselor. Like, I've done all kinds of crap. I'm not saying I have the most diverse job experience. I've never been a web developer or anything like that. But I worked a fair number of random jobs before I went to medical school, trying to figure out what to do with myself. And so in each of those jobs, even making ice cream, there were certain things that I liked about it, which we'll talk about in a second. But this is also really important to think about, okay, what do you like about your job? Even the 10% that you do like about it. And then that way you can sort of, look for that stuff going forward. Oh, so what I really like about my job is that there's like a couple hours during the day that like I get to kind of be by myself. And even though I have to open, I can turn on my audiobook and I'm listening to an audiobook where I'm like prepping all the food and chopping and stuff like that. And like, that's actually my favorite part of the day. Okay, so it sounds like you really like some amount of time where there's some amount of autonomy and, like simple labor that you can do. And maybe if you could like listen to an audiobook, like, okay, cool, makes sense. So you also want to diagnose what you enjoy about your job. And then what you can do is gravitate towards that in the next job. Okay? Next thing, if you're miserable at your job, super practical advice. Jobs are not static. Huge misunderstanding about jobs. So most people, when we enter the workforce, assume that the job is what we do. Right? So if you're like an 18-year-old kid or 22-year-old kid or whatever, you're at your first job, especially because of the power dynamic and stuff, you don't think that there's anything about your job that can be changed. Turns out, most jobs can be modified in some way, shape, or form. So I'll give you all just this example. I was talking about doing ice cream, right? So my first job was serving ice cream. So I worked at this place called Marble Slab. And so the owners, it was a small town. And so the owners, like I was serving ice cream and the owners started me off in the afternoon shift. Because in their experience, the afternoon was the busiest. And so you got the most tips in the afternoon. So most young kids who are looking to make money, that's why you get a job, right? They wanted to work in the afternoon. And that way you made the most tips. And so if you're working 1 hour instead of getting paid, I think I got paid, I want to say like maybe $5 an hour or something when I was working. I don't remember exactly what minimum wage was. It was minimum wage plus tips. And so I started off working in the afternoon. And it was like me and like one other person. We'd like split the tips. And so I'd make like a couple more bucks an hour. I'd make like $8 an hour instead of like $5.25 or whatever. And so they just sort of assume that that's, because that's what most of the young kids did. It's busy. Owner would come in early in the morning. They would open up and then, they would kind of go home like around the time that things got super busy. And so that's kind of what was assumed. And so I kind of I didn't really like working during the busy times. I found that the actual money that I got was not that much more. People were cheap tippers. I didn't always get $8 an hour. Sometimes it was like, $6.25 instead of $5 an hour, something like that. So the tips, like I'd work for 8 hours and I'd make like maybe like somewhere between $5 and $10 extra for 8 hours of my time, which I just didn't feel like was a good use of my time. So I asked the boss, I was like, okay, so like, is there any way I could like open, And the boss was like, sure. I mean, like you have to learn some things. And I'm like, okay, please God, teach me something. Like, let me at least learn how to make ice cream. Like, that's pretty cool. Like, let me learn how to make ice cream. Yeah, I'd love to learn how to make ice cream. I already know how to make the waffle cones because we have to do that as we run out. I'd love to learn how to make ice cream. Turns out that if you work at an ice cream place, making ice cream isn't that hard. They've got a machine. You put in a bunch of cream, you add some flavor, chop up some strawberries and toss it in there, turn the machine on, and then empty the machine into a thing and then stick it in a freezer. And then you move it from one freezer to the next freezer. It's pretty cool. Like I made ice cream. And so what I really loved is like opening, actually the boss was like fantastic. Like, okay, so wait, so now that this kid is opening, I don't even have to come to work until like noon. Boss loves that. Kid is you have to accept deliveries. You've got to make the ice cream. You've got to open. You've got to get everything ready. You're going to have to show up 2 hours before we open up. And I'm like, great. Because then what happened is like I started getting really good at it. I was like, all right, cool. So like I'm showing up 2 hours before opening because I have to do all this kind of stuff. And like the boss would also do bookkeeping and stuff during that time, right? So I got super efficient at it, would start making my ice cream, would accept my deliveries or whatnot. I'd pull out a book and I'd read for like half an hour here, half an hour there. And I'm getting paid for that. Like, that's great. I'd make some waffle cones, and then like things would open up and things were like pretty quiet. Like, the store would open up. I'd show up at 8, the place would open at 10. Who gets ice cream at like 10 a.m. on a weekday? Like, not that many people. I get a customer, like one customer every half hour. So most of the time, I'm just kind of like sitting on my ass, which is fantastic. So this was way better. And then things start to get busy around, I'd work from like 8 to 3 or 8 to 4. So I'd be like super busy for 1 hour between 3 and 4, make a couple of tips. And then at the end of the day, I'd go home. My point here is that if you ask, you can actually adjust some things of your job. I'm not saying that you can necessarily adjust everything, okay? Not saying that you can dictate what you want to do. But you can ask, and you can actually change a couple of dimensions of your job, and you can make your experience way better. So if there's a particular part of your job that you don't like, I wouldn't frame it as, hey, can I not do this? So generally speaking, bosses don't like that. So a more practical tip here is to ask, talk to your bosses a little bit about, hey, like, I'm interested in learning more stuff, or what is the morning shift like, or like, try to be doing be wanting to learn something as opposed to avoiding something, but the same difference, right? So you can say, oh, I'd love to learn how to make ice cream. Like, that sounds pretty cool. Can you tell me about opening? In the back of my mind, I'm like, I don't like dealing with customers, right? So there are modifications you can make if you ask, and if you ask nicely. Very important tip, underappreciated for people who are starting out. Last thing that I'm going to share with y'all is don't suffer alone. So there's a lot of research that shows that when we struggle with something and we share it with other people, sharing our struggles actually helps us in terms of like managing our emotions and having a positive outlook and things like that. So good examples of this is something that we've known for a long time. So a lot of times, so historically, like in the history of humanity, so a lot of times, a lot of community came through things like religious organizations, right? That's a place where people, like funerals and things like that, like ceremonies where people would pass away. There's something healing about suffering with other people or commiserating with other people who are suffering. So good examples of this are funerals that take something that's, let's just call it an objectively bad experience, and soften the blow some. Other examples of this are things like the sober groups, so like Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, Refuge Recovery, things like that for people who aren't into the AA kind of religiosity. We can sort of get together and we can talk about things and we can share things and we can sort of like, we can feel better, right? So it's a huge part, obviously, of things like AOE healing, which is what we do. So it's on this principle, which is, by the way, very scientifically validated. And there's a good example of this stuff, like Irvin Yalom talks about this in his books on group psychotherapy, where he like unpacks what is it that's therapeutic about a group setting. And it turns out that it's not some kind of clinical protocol. It's the fact that when human beings get together and they share their suffering, it sort of alleviates it, right? This is also why we have a group coaching program, by the way. So that's like, we've sort of also figured out that like when you create a space where people can come and share their troubles and you have a coach who facilitates that, instead of turning into a cesspool of negativity, which is sometimes what happens on the internet, which is you'll have these communities that are sort of help-seeking communities that can kind of become these toxic cesspools. And so how do you share negativity, but also as a group, work yourself out of it? And so one of the modifications we made in our group coaching program was that we added a coach, right? So if you think about an AA meeting, a lot of people there will have experience, but it's essentially there's no one with formal teaching at all. So it's just peers. So there's also peer support mental health services, which have been studied and stuff like that. So the key thing here is that don't suffer alone, right? So this person kind of mentioned that there are people at work, and I know plenty of people there who make it worthwhile. So I think this is where, when we kind of think about our work situation, this person is sort of working alone. Do y'all get that? Do y'all feel that from this? Where they're sort of like working all by themselves. And so this is where I'd say reach out to someone and kind of ask someone. So if you're starting a new job, here's some language, right? So this is the kind of stuff that a coach would help you do. So, because you're like, okay, how do I reach out to someone? No one's taught me how to reach out to someone. Do I turn to someone who make it worthwhile. And then like, I absolutely despise this. Like, how do I talk to someone who seems to be enjoying this when I don't really enjoy it? Right? How do you say that? How do you open up that conversation? So here's what I'd say. I'd approach that person. I'd say, hey, it seems like you're really awesome at this job, and you also seem to really enjoy it. I'm just curious, is that the case? Do you really like it here? Then first of all, you can sort of, just ask them a question. You can ask them, what was it like when you started? What were your first couple of weeks like? Right? So you can ask them kind of an open-ended question to sort of gauge their sort of experience. It's a way to connect with someone at work. And they'll say, oh yeah, first couple weeks are always rough, right? And you can say, yeah, I'm really feeling that. It's a lot. And then you can even ask, hey, do you have any tips for someone who's just starting out? And they're like, absolutely. Here, let me teach you a couple things that will make things easier for you. Or they'll say, yeah, it's always rough. And then you'll kind of have a laugh about it. Maybe the next day at work, they're like, hey kid, how you doing? Right? So you can start to form connections. And sometimes we don't even know the language to open up that conversation because no one ever teaches us this. And so this is where sometimes having a little bit of expertise can help, right? What do you say to someone at work? Because they don't teach us this stuff. And so some people sort of they kind of figure it out. Some people have good modeling and things like that. But the key thing here is don't suffer alone. So talk to other people at work. And this isn't about organizing and putting everything on strike and down with the bosses. I'm just talking about just connect with another person. Don't suffer alone. Be like, hey, this is hard. And this is something that I understood really well in residency because residency is hard. You're working 80 hours a week. You're tired all the time. You're not getting paid very much. We have a saying in residency that crap rolls downhill. And so since you're at the bottom of the totem pole as the intern, you have to do all the scut work. So you've got to fill out all the prescriptions and you have to do all the paperwork and stuff like that. You have to argue with the insurance company. You have to do all the work, the bad work. So the cool thing is that when I was in residency, most psychiatry residencies do this. We had a 90-minute session once a week that was organized by our residency, where we would all get together in a room and we would sort of commiserate around what the experience of being in residency was like. What do we like about it? What do we not like about it? What's hard about it? That was also facilitated. And we were a psychiatry residency, so it was facilitated by a psychiatrist. And so don't suffer alone. So I know that oftentimes you'll be in this situation, which is I'm miserable at my job. How do I not be miserable at my job? And the first instinct may be, oh, just get a different job. The problem is that if you just jump to a different job and you don't really understand why you're miserable in the first place, you may just jump to another miserable job. And then it's miserable job after miserable job after miserable job after miserable job. So if you're looking at, okay, how do I be less miserable? There are actually a couple of general things. The first two things we're going to talk about is two particular thoughts which are born of misery but also propagate misery. And as we become aware of those thoughts, as we think about them critically, as we sort of shape our thinking, we can start to be a little bit more constructive even about our job experience. And if we have this thought, there's no point. No, actually, there's some valuable experience here. There's actually a lot of good stuff. I'm really glad I worked, serving ice cream. So that taught me a lot about what to appreciate about my future jobs and what to look for. It also taught me that I like autonomy at work. I like to be sort of left alone and do my own thing. I don't want someone breathing over my neck. So another thing to keep in mind is that especially if you're early on, it may not get easy, but you'll get better at it. Right? So if we think about a classic RPG, you start off fighting level 1 mobs. And then does the mob become a level 0 mob? And then the future mobs become level -1, level -5, level -50? No. You level up. You get better at it. It doesn't necessarily get easier. Even now, I'm not sure that my life today is easier than even it was in residency. There's a lot of stuff that made my life really easy in residency, even though I was working a ton. So you'll get better at it. So have some faith in yourself. Next thing is we talk about this sort of thinking critically. What does that mean? That means diagnosing the source of your misery and the source of your pleasure, if there's any at work. And so the next time you look for a job, start to think a little bit about, okay, like, what do I want to move towards? Like, what do I need to move into? What do I want to avoid for my next job? And then what's going to happen is you don't like job number one, but then job number two, you've got two choices, right? You can get a circle or you can get a square. And you're like, oh, you know what? I definitely don't want a circle. Okay, let me try a square. Okay, well, now I've got two choices. I've got circle over here. I could always go back to a circle. Got a square over here. Or I can get a triangle. Let me try a triangle. Oh, actually, this is pretty good. Now I've got this kind of triangle, right? An isosceles triangle or an equilateral triangle. Okay, like, let me try the isosceles triangle, right? But this doesn't happen if you're just mindlessly jumping from one job to another. So you have to think a little bit about, okay, what are the dimensions of this job that make it miserable? What are the dimensions of this job that I enjoy? Another thing that they don't really tell you is that a lot of jobs are actually flexible. If you ask politely and there's some flexibility, your boss may actually accommodate you. And so jobs are not necessarily static. So you may be able to, swap work with someone. You can say, hey, I actually don't mind like cleaning, but I really don't like working with customers. So how about I do all the mopping and sweeping and you man the front for a little bit. And maybe if you don't like customers, you can do that. The last thing is that we know to not suffer alone. Ton of research that shows that commiserating with with other people is actually really, really important in terms of like forming connections and in terms of reducing misery. And this is something that we've done it in psychiatry training. We know it works in group psychotherapy settings. We also do this in our group coaching program, right? Where we like share problems. But a big part of our group coaching program is we sort of recognize that sharing problems is not enough. I mean, sometimes it's enough, but we also have it facilitated by a coach who sort of will also help you all facilitate accountability and things like that. So we have all that kind of stuff baked in there. Because one of the things that I found that was a little bit unfortunate about group psychotherapy was that there really oftentimes weren't goals, right? So if you like think about like a group psychotherapy that's oriented towards PTSD, I guess the goal is clinical improvement, but people wouldn't work on a week-to-week basis about, okay, like if I have PTSD, how do I form a healthy relationship going forward? Right? So if I have body dysmorphia, how do I develop like a healthy exercise plan? Oftentimes that component of like accountability and progress was like missing in psychotherapy. But this is something that's been very well researched. Everything from funerals to even our AOE healing, all this kind of stuff is really important. So if you're at a job and you're miserable, don't suffer alone. Questions? Let's try non-Euclidean shapes. How do I know if my therapist is a good match for me? I don't know. I mean, I think that's a question you've got to answer. Hold on, I'm going to turn on some light. That being said, I can say a couple of things. Oh, wow, that's super bright. Let's try. Maybe that's better. Isn't that better? Okay. So how do you know if your therapist is right for you? So like, I'd say, first of all, you feel safe there. You feel like you can trust them. I think those are really important. Like, are you making progress? Are they sort of giving you what you feel like you need? So sometimes a big part of finding the right therapist is finding like the right amount of activity by the therapist. Do you want someone who's listening more or someone who's a little bit more directive? Like how active do you want them to be in the session? Like that's something to think about. But I think, trust, safety, and progress are the three things to really think about. What if you wake up miserable? That's actually a really good question. So, for those of you who, okay. What if you wake up miserable? What do you do? So the question is, what determines what state of mind you wake up in? Oftentimes, the first thing that happens in an empty mind, in a mind that's fresh, is the stuff that's left over. So waking up miserable is really about what state of mind you go into when you go to sleep. Because the work that is left undone when you go to sleep will sort of unload first thing in the morning. We also know there are a couple of clinical things to consider. So early morning awakening is a highly specific sign of a depressive episode. So if you're waking up for, every day at like 4 a.m. and like feeling like super miserable, despite the fact that you went to sleep at midnight, and lots of negative thoughts, you may want to consider getting a clinical evaluation. But I think a big part of people who wake up miserable is the way that they go to sleep. So oftentimes what I'll find is that there's no emotional processing on their part or no wind down period for them before they go to sleep. The other thing that I tend to see for people who are highly miserable when they wake up is that they'll oftentimes within the first 5 minutes of waking up, or oftentimes less, I'd almost say 60 to 90 seconds within waking up, they're looking at a screen. So 2 things to really consider if you wake up miserable, super short. The first is, how are you going to sleep? So if you're using a lot of screens, which cause emotional suppression, so remember that screens of all kinds, social media, not all kinds, but social media, video games, all that kind of stuff, like watching something on your iPad before you go to bed, like all that kind of stuff is going to drown out your negative emotions. And then what happens is, like, as you sleep, your mind is processing all that crap, and the first thing that you wake up, there's all this trash that you had pushed to the side before you went to bed, so it's waiting for you when you wake up. So your wind down process before you go to bed is very, very important. So if you want to stop being miserable first thing in the morning, what I'd say is the hour before bed, you should be super careful with what you do. So number 1 is no screens, and then you're saying to yourself, then how the hell do I fall asleep? It's going to take practice. Okay? So I think 15 to 30 minutes of yoga and meditation is excellent before bed. And that's where you're going to do all the crap that you should do. So all that crap that doesn't get done, I'm going to take out the trash, I'm going to clean the kitchen, I'm going to brush my teeth, I'm going to floss. You're going to floss before bed. As you do all of those things, you will feel purified. You're going to feel clean when you go to bed. You're going to be a little bit physically tired, right? Because you did a little bit of that yoga. You're going to feel good about yourself because your kitchen isn't a mess. You took out the trash. You started a load of laundry, and then you put it in the dryer before you went to bed. And then when you wake up, for the first hour when you wake up, no screens. What am I going to do? Oh my God, I don't have a screen. You're going to do all the crap you're supposed to do. You're going to take a shower. You're going to do some more yoga. You're going to cook yourself some breakfast. If you do these 2 things, the hour before you go to bed and the hour that you wake up in the morning, the most critical parts of your day, set the tone for the whole day. Really common for people to feel miserable when they first wake up in the morning. And it's like, well, what came before that? It's like people asking like, oh, like, what do I do if I'm nauseous and ill? It's like, okay, what did you eat? Right? What came before? So that's what you should do if you're miserable when you wake up. Then you may do that for a couple days and you're like, it's not fixed yet. Yeah, it takes a little while, right? Then over time, you'll start to like move in the right direction. Great question. Why do people ask random questions instead of addressing the current topic? Dog chef, bro, girl, I don't know. William 1007 8346. I just started my first real job last week and I needed to hear it may not get easier, but you'll get better at it. Yeah. You will 100% get better at it. And the stuff that you don't continue to like, you don't have to do for the rest of your life. I know it feels that way, but it's not going to be the case. Gammon Kills asking, can complaining to coworkers too much turn it into a toxic work environment? Yes, it can. So I'm not saying complain. What I'm saying is commiserate. So there's a difference. So notice that when I was talking about like how to connect with other people, I wasn't telling the person, this is exactly what I mean. This is like, these are skills that people don't teach us, right? So if you do group coaching, well, that's where we emphasize some of these skills the most, but I'll share this stuff with you, okay? So here's where it's really important to think about this. So it's not complain. Notice that what I told the person was not, I hate it here. I absolutely despise my job. I hate everything about this place. I hate you. We're not talking about complaining. What we're talking about is sharing struggles. Complaining is something that has no empathy to it. When I'm complaining, who am I thinking about? Just me. I don't care about anyone else. I'm complaining. My French fries are cold. I don't care about you or how hard you work or the fact that this is a frozen French fry store. Whatever the hell that is. I'm complaining. So when you want to commiserate with someone, and you'll see this even at places like funerals, right? So funerals are about sharing something. They're about sharing grief. They're not about complaining. This dumbass, they're dead. You know, like, you don't say things like that at funerals. It's not about complaining. It's about sharing grief, right? So don't complain, because complaining will turn something into a toxic environment. How do you share something? That's where, like, you know, you ask your coworkers, hey, when you started out, were things tough for you? You can ask a question. What were things like starting out? Engage in a conversation. Think about the other person. Right? So that's where, like, it's really, really important. But complaining is not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is sharing. Right? Connecting with another human being, being empathic. Okay, couple of other questions. So, where to start on helping high IQ individuals that suffer from existential depression? So one thing is that if you suffer from depression, you should probably see a clinician. That'll help, right? Hopefully. Second thing is, so we have a whole branch of Dr. K's Guide to Meditation that to depression that covers what we call congruent depression. So one of the things that I realized is kind of interesting, but I realized that when I saw people who were depressed, there are two kinds of people who are depressed. There are people who are depressed as a malfunction of their mind, which is a clinical illness. So when we think about pathology, what that means is a part of your body or mind is not functioning the way that it's supposed to. So this person is happily married, has kids, has a stable job, and is still depressed. They have no reason to be depressed. If they have no reason to be depressed, that's what I sort of think about as a clinical depression. Now, there's some group of people who have every reason to be depressed, and they're depressed as well. And a medication ain't going to fix that. Now, the tricky thing is that clinically, you can actually have both. In fact, the most common picture is some amount of both. So what we tend to see in clinically depressive episodes is that you'll have a very real trigger, which is like a psychosocial stressor. So you lose your job, you get dumped, someone in your family passes away, something really bad does happen to you. And then that triggers a depression that has a life of its own. But when it comes to dealing with congruent depression, which may be like existential depression, generally speaking, there's a whole section of the guide about that. But this is what I'd say is that oftentimes high IQ individuals suffer from one huge problem, which is that they've got one good tool in their tool belt, and that's the only thing that they know how to use. So people who are high IQ individuals who are suffering from existential depression, they're a one-trick pony. All they've got is their IQ. And IQ can't solve it, so they're kind of SOL. So what they oftentimes need to do is focus on their EQ. Their EQ is oftentimes quite underdeveloped because they can get away with using their IQ, right? So this is the kind of person who like, all I've got is a knife, but even though I don't have a hammer, I'm going to bang things into place with the flat of my knife. And then at some point, like, I never develop my hammer. And so I've just got one tool. So that's where when I work with people who have high IQ, like they'll try to engage intellectually and I just won't do it because it's not going to work. Oftentimes, if you think about depression, it's emotional in nature, right? Like depression is a feeling. There's also elements of spirituality. So I tend to find that the spirituality and the emotional sides of this person's life are oftentimes woefully underdeveloped. Because if IQ would have fixed it, like since they have a high IQ, they would have done it. Oftentimes, there's also a lot to deal with in terms of ego. So this is also where like what happens is they start to develop an identity of like, once again, being a one-trick pony, right? So IQ is the only thing that I'm going to work on because it's the thing that I'm best at. So oftentimes, the thing that gets in the way of developing spiritually or developing emotionally is ego. Because as long as we're playing an intellectual game, I'm good at it. But the second you pull me out of the library and onto the basketball court, I start to suck. And therefore, I don't want to play that game. But you need to play that game because this is something that doesn't get fixed in the library. It's not an int check, right? It's a con check or a strength check or a charisma check. And then you're GG'd out because you invested all of your stat points into int. And so it's a really common problem. But it's like, it's tough because what you have to teach that person how to do, you have to make them feel safe enough to be bad at something, which is get in touch with their emotions, which is to like take a spiritual perspective on life. Great question. Okay. All right. There's so much. Oh my God, I've missed so much of chat. What if you feel like you've spread all your stat points to evenly jack of all trades type? So there's definitely, you got to play like a bard, dude. So there are some classes where you want to go all in on one stat type, and there are other classes that you need an even distribution. So I'll give you all just an example of one job where jack of all trades works really, really well. So if you look at business side folks in tech companies, these are like great examples of like hybrid builds, right? So you've got the engineers and you've got the business stuff. The problem is that if you get a business person to talk directly to an engineer and the business person doesn't understand the game, like the engineering, like they're going to ask for things that the engineers can't do. And then the engineer will push back and get really, really frustrated. But the business person is ranked higher, so they'll be like, I don't care, do it. We need more microtransactions. Microtransactions make us money. I don't care about the game. Give more microtransactions. Instead of level 5 gems, we need level 10 gems. As many levels. The more levels, the better. The game designers are like, people aren't going to enjoy playing this game. They're like, I don't care. Right? So sometimes like you'll have technical people and you'll have business people and they don't talk to each other well. Okay? Then what can happen, like what's awesome is if you get an engineer who like goes to business school and gets an MBA because they understand the technical side and they understand the business side. So this is a hybrid build. It's not like you don't even need an MBA. You can just get promoted to a manager position. You can like be a manager. You can learn some basic finance and stuff. And if you're a hybrid build like this works really, really well because you understand the business side, you understand the technical side. So if they're like, okay, like, you know, if someone wants a feature, if your CEO is like, hey, we want this feature, and you're like, that's really a terrible idea. This is what it's going to cost us. No, but it's so simple. It's just, I thought it would be simple to implement. And it's like, well, yeah, I can see that. So part of the reason it looks so simple is because the back end is really robust, right? It's like kind of like And then you tell this kind of stuff to the CEO. It's sort of like, the most brilliant chef makes actually the simplest, the best tasting omelet in the world, which is one of the simplest things you can cook, actually requires the most experience to make. Use some analogy. And then, It's just like what you want is the brilliant chef equivalent of this feature. That's what we're going to build. This is what it's going to cost. And the CEO is like, okay, fine, forget about it. Whereas like, if you're an engineer and the CEO is like, I want this feature, and you tell the CEO that they're an idiot, then like, that's not going to work, right? So hybrid builds are fantastic. For what it's worth, I'm a hybrid. It works great. I'm not the best psychiatrist you're going to meet. I'm also not the best monk you're going to meet, right? So I have colleagues who like practice psychiatry for 50 hours a week. They're better at it than I am. I'm also not the best streamer you're going to find, right? There are streamers who are way better than I am. Most of them are way better than I am. So it's the hybrid build. I'm a big fan. I'm not the best tandoor operator either. Good point. I'm low-level tandoor operator. I'm decent on the grill. Decent on the grill. Yeah, look, I'm not saying I'm bad. I don't need to be the best. I'm decent. Like, I am what I am, and I offer what I have to the world, and hopefully that helps. And that's really what I'm looking to do. I'm not looking to be the best. I'm looking to help. It's okay. I don't have to be the best in any of those categories. This is the thing. You got to understand this. Like, this is fantastic. I'm really lucky. I'm grateful. It's not about being the best. It's like, look, it's 8:20 in the evening. I'm working. And what am I doing for my work? I'm hanging out with y'all. This is my job. How awesome is this? Forget about being the best. I have so much to be grateful for. This job is fantastic. I'm going to do the best that I can. If it helps people, fantastic. If it doesn't, I apologize, and I'll try better. Y'all get that? Like, this is great. Everyone's so caught up in being the best. Why do you have to be the best? We're talking about not being miserable at your job. Rule number 1 for not being miserable at your job, stop trying to be the best. Try to figure out what you enjoy and try to like help another human being. Even if you're in retail or food service or whatever. Like even if you're like serving people food. Recognize that like, I don't know if y'all have ever had a good waiter or a bad waiter or like like even in fast food. So recently Taco Bell brought back the Mexican pizza. Okay? I don't know if you guys know what the Mexican pizza is. I don't know if you know what Taco Bell is. We're very US centric here because that's where I grew up. I've been to like 40 countries in my life, but So if you know what the Taco Bell Mexican pizza is, it's this weird side dish that basically only Indian people ate because we're vegetarian. And it's one of the best vegetarian things at Taco Bell. And so like you can get a crappy Mexican pizza. Like this is like where the sauce isn't spread and there's no cheese on it and it's like lumps of this. Like even if you go to a fast food restaurant, I don't know if you guys have ever had like a crappy burger where they don't even spread the ketchup or whatever, right? Mayo, whatever you put on your burger. You can get a gigantic glob of it and they'll put like a pile of whatever and it'll be like a poorly assembled piece of crap fast food burger. And sometimes you'll get someone at a fast food restaurant who like actually spreads everything the way that it's supposed to be and like puts attention to detail with the way that they assemble their mass-produced crap. And it's like night and day in terms of my pleasure. Y'all get that? So anything that you can do, doesn't matter what your job is, you can do a good job and you can make the world a better place with it. Everyone loves Mexican pizza. It's great. Most of my friends, even growing up in Texas, most of my friends didn't even know what it was. They like would never order it. Anyway, let's move on. We've got other stuff. Okay. All right, let me see what we're doing next. Give me a second, chat. Okay. Probably my favorite fast food is Mexican pizza from Taco Bell. It is. Okay. Man, of all the opportunities for a sponsored stream, I can't believe like I could have gotten sponsored by Taco Bell for this. Maybe I would have taken Mexican pizzas. We wouldn't even need money. We would have taken, and that, boys and girls, is why I'm not a very good streamer. For all this like emphasis on like healthy diet and like take care of yourselves, this stream is sponsored by Taco Bell. Oh man. All right. No, don't donate gift cards to me. Donate gift cards to Taco Bell to people who like can't afford Taco Bell. If you guys want to donate to the HG Foundation, you can donate to us there. We're raising money. And, we try to put it towards helping people and other silly things like that. But if you donate to us, you're not going to don't donate to Taco Bell. Donate to like the people that we're trying to help. So if you guys don't know, the HG Foundation, we like started a nonprofit. And that's like focused on things like research for things that we care about, that the NIH doesn't care about and grant people don't care about. Like, the positive effects of video games, for example, is like research that we do. We're still, we wrote a paper on basically the developmental trajectory of incels, which is something that maybe now will get funded because incels have been on the news a little bit more recently. But, our perspective on incels is to try to help these people and so to understand how they sort of wind up the way that they do. We have other research projects going on, like developing measures of EQ, so emotional quotient. So we've been trying to figure out how our coaching program gets the results that it does. So this is kind of a subtlety that is important to understand. So our coaching program helps people in terms of clinically validated instruments around things like depression and anxiety. Now, this is kind of interesting because you will say, but Dr. K, I thought you said your coaching program is not clinical. It's not. But if it's not clinical, how can it have clinical benefits? That's a great question. So let me ask y'all something. So are there any non-clinical interventions that can improve type 2 diabetes and other measures of a physical illness that are not clinical? Can you improve diabetes or heart disease without medicine? Exercise, right? So here's what we think is really, really important. We understand that there are lots of non-clinical interventions which can have clinical benefits for the body. Yoga, Tai Chi, exercise, right? We have a lot less information about non-clinical interventions to improve mental health. So we'll also have studies on things like yoga and Tai Chi, and especially mindfulness. Meditation is the main thing that we've looked at. But we believe that helping someone achieve their goals and helping someone sort of develop healthy relationships and helping someone not feel miserable when they wake up first thing in the morning, helping people develop healthy sleep routines, helping people put their lives together will actually lead to some kind of clinical improvement, even though it's not clinical in nature. And that's why we developed a coaching program. Literally the reason that we chose to train y'all, right? So we recruited coaches from our community, as opposed to, we would get requests all the time from, hey, will you come to our clinic and teach our therapists like about video game addiction and all this kind of stuff? And we actually chose to focus on our community instead. And the main reason we chose that is because I actually felt like what's missing is not, I mean, people definitely could benefit from more mental health services, But the problem is that, like, it's hard to get a therapist anyway. Teaching a therapist that you're never going to see anyway, or you have to spend 8 weeks in to like see, like, therapists are overworked already. Like, do they need advanced training? Absolutely. Are we going to do that at some point? Sure. Do we already do that in some capacity? Absolutely. Right. So we just got invited to be a guest lecturer at one of the UC institutions this morning. Literally, I got an email. So we're going to go there and we're going to teach them. Sure. Hopefully. We'll see if it works out. Right? So we teach at some institutions. Reason we started a coaching program is because I think, like, what this community needs is not necessarily therapy. Do some of y'all need therapy? Absolutely. But what we need is, like, basic understanding of, like, how stuff works. Why am I miserable? Where does misery come from? How do I actually, like, do the things that I know I should do? How do I, like, work on this stuff? Like, how do I feel better about myself? How do I stop playing as many video games? Right? So we measured a very interesting outcome. So we developed an instrument that measures the positive and negative effects of video games. So unlike everyone else, which is just looking at video game addiction, they're all looking at the negatives of video games. We realize, being a healthy gamer, because I'm a gamer, right? I still love playing Dota. We realize that, hey, actually, like, video games can sometimes help people. So we developed an instrument that looks at both. And we saw something really interesting in our coaching program, which is that negative effects of video games go down, but positive effects of video games stay exactly the same. And what do you mean by positive effects of video games? So we'll ask questions like, video games interfere with my academic or professional life. And then it's like scale of 1 to 4. Strongly disagree, agree, strongly agree. And then we'll also ask the question, video games serve as an important source of gaming communities serve as an important source of social support for me. Social and emotional support. Strongly disagree, agree, strongly agree. Right? So those are examples of questions. So you can look at the positive and negative effects. And so essentially what we see, we haven't really figured out how to measure the total number of hours or things like that people can play, because then you have to install things onto their computer and stuff like that. So we don't want to do that for privacy reasons. So it's all subjective. But what we tend to see is that people, like, suffer less from video games, but they actually stay exactly the same. Non-statistically significant improvements even in positive gaming effects. So this is the kind of stuff that, like, 3 years ago when we developed this, we talked to people who did grants and stuff like that, and they're like, yeah, we're not interested in this. Like, no. No one was interested in funding it. So that's why we did it ourselves. Okay, let's move on. We've got time for maybe one more, and then we want to do a solid meditation today, okay, y'all? Okay, I don't see any masculinity within myself. I, 20M, have never really talked to women at all in high school, so I've been trying to put myself out there by getting on dating apps and transferring schools to be around more women. I've been looking into self-improvement through working out and reading more books like Atomic Habits. I recently started reading Models by Mark Manson, and it's an interesting read, but reading about what women are most attracted to makes me really wonder if I have any of those traits. I never really had a great father figure growing up. My dad is chronically depressed, has no friends, and has been unemployed for several years now. He's one of the most sensitive people I know in my life and is the polar opposite of what I see in a man. He would get emotional about the most minute criticisms and get overly anxious for the smallest things, like trying to talk to strangers, or if I accidentally injure myself, like getting a small cut or bruise. For the longest time, he was even scared of me learning how to cook in fear of me possibly injuring myself. My mom always told me I have a lot of traits similar to my dad when it comes to anxiety and sensitivity, and I honestly never saw that as a problem until I started getting into self-improvement and dating. Overall, my parents really cared a lot about sharing my emotions, which really helped me a lot with some of my depressive episodes, but I can't really see how those traits are attractive at all to women. Manson describes the ideal man as someone who is confident and doesn't care about what other people think. For as long as I can remember, I've always deeply cared about what others thought of me and would typically get very emotional if someone disagreed with me over the slightest topics, like liking a certain video game or TV show. I've also been more prone to depression as I've had several episodes, including one where I had to be homeschooled for all of 6th grade. That sounds rough, dude. I've never had any confidence in myself, and I've always been more emotional than other guys, and I have no clue how anyone will find that attractive. It doesn't help that I've been either skinny or fat my entire life, and it's been so hard to gain muscle recently due to some health problems I've been having lately. I've never had any athletic hobbies, and I'm interested in a bunch of nerdy stuff and also studying computer engineering. Everything I see within myself is antithetical to what women value most in a strong, bold, confident man. I'm just an overly emotional nerd with little self-esteem to support myself, and according to every successful Chad out there, I'm a beta virgin loser who will never score with anyone. So this is tough. Because sometimes we grow up and we have a lack of experience, right? So like we're like concerned. We're 20 years old. This is going to be sort of male focused. We're 20 years old. We have no experience like talking to girls or dating or things like that. We've got no positive role models, right? Because dad is depressed, unemployed, is overly emotionally sensitive. We don't like really know what to do with ourselves. So enter self-improvement. So we start to read books and we find answers. So books written by Mark Manson, right? And so like, he wrote The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F. This guy knows what he's talking about. He's a New York Times bestselling author and whatnot. Right? And then Mark Manson says, these are the answers. You have to be confident. You have to not care what other people think. This is what it takes to, this is the truth. He's the speaker of truth. This is what women want. And then you don't have those things. And so what does that mean for you? Right? So like if you kind of fall into this bucket, like you're kind of like, okay, so like I got dealt a kind of crappy hand with no role models. I missed the boat on certain like critical experiences. Like I didn't grow up learning how to talk to the opposite sex. Right? And then I started like reading stuff, and the more I read stuff, the more I realized how screwed I am. And then what happens is we start to get this like creeping fear that like we're doomed to failure. Right? And then sometimes you're just like, I'm screwed. It's GG. It's over. So the more that we educate ourselves, the more we realize how screwed we are. And so I'm like, what do you do about this? Like if you're not masculine enough and like you don't know how to relate to other people, like what do you do in this situation? Right? And then what happens is as you find the answers, like as you read these books, like people give you answers. I don't know if y'all caught our last stream where we talked about basically the model that these people use is by breeding insecurity. Because the more insecure they make you feel and the more that they say, by the way, I have the answer, here it is, right? Use my course or buy the essential manly Chad secrets for $59.99. 3 easy payments. That's their model. But as you read this stuff, like Mark Manson's like a pretty reputable dude, right? I don't know. I haven't read this book, so I don't know how well he cites what women want, and we'll get to that in a second. But he tells you, here are the answers. And this is the common answer. This is the most common answer that we tend to see. As someone who is confident and doesn't care about what other people think. And then here you are, you've always cared about what other people thought. You cared too much about what other people thought. And that sort of makes sense, right? Because if you're someone who's been socially anxious and has been always concerned about what people think. And the one thing that you wish you could change about your life, if you could change one thing, it's that stupid voice in your head that's like, oh my God, what are they going to think? What are they going to think? What are they going to think? Because that voice paralyzes you. It keeps you from going to parties. Even if you go to parties, you're not able to enjoy yourself. Even if you go to parties, and who cares about enjoyment, but you can't seem competent to other people because you're so stuck in your own head. And the social anxiety gets the better of you. And then they see the social anxiety, and the whole thing gets worse, and it all kind of falls apart. And so they say, oh, stop caring what other people think. And then you stop caring what other people think. And then you know what you become? Do you become confident? Maybe. Chances are, if you stop caring what other people think, what you'll really become is an asshole. Because that's what people become if they stop caring what other people think. But that's the thing, right? Is you want to get rid of that, because that thing like just tortures your life. So you're screwed. And you need to get rid of it. I need to become calloused because my anxiety controls me so much. My emotions control me so much. What's the only solution? To numb myself and become calloused. And look, Mark Manson said it too. So it must be real. And all these like alphas say like, yeah, like stop caring what other people think. There's the predators and the prey. And I'm going to be a predator and you're going to be a prey. No, like I hate to break it to you, but predators and prey, like that happens in the Serengeti. Not in human society, right? Like, I don't think so anyway. I think most of human society is like, honestly, it's like PvE co-op. Like most human beings try to help each other. And like, we kind of get along and we form friendships and we form connections, right? Predators and prey, I don't think so. I'm not saying I'm 100% objectively correct in that. I think that there's a lot of scientific evidence that shows that human society is communal and altruistic for the most part, right? Like, I think we can sort of safely assume that. But that's the tricky thing, is that you're controlled by all this negativity. And so then people come along and say, hey, be confident, become callous, become numb, stop caring what other people think. And it seems like such a relief to you, right? Because those are the thoughts that torture you. So what do you do if you're kind of in this situation? If you're like too emotional, not manly enough, like don't have a good role model, missed out on some key experiences, so now you're like 20 and it's like too late. And then like these self-help books seem to be helping, but they also like kind of make you feel a little bit, I'm kind of screwed. So we're going to talk, I'm going to give you all kind of 5 things to work on in terms of like building confidence and tackling this issue of self-esteem. And like how to get there. And especially as it sort of relates to dating. Okay? So this is going to be sort of a heteronormative masculine approach, but we'll touch on variations hopefully at the end a little bit. So the first thing that y'all got to do is be careful about generalizations. Be very, very careful about generalizations. Let's start with this idea of masculinity. What does it mean to be masculine enough? Right? So am I masculine enough? I don't know. What do you think? What makes me masculine enough? Is it facial hair? Because I don't have facial hair. Oh, like facial hair is masculine. So like, I don't have facial hair. Do people without facial hair like are they masculine enough? Is it the ability to change a tire? I can change a tire. I can grill. Do those things make me masculine? Are there masculine people who don't know how to grill? But there are some people who are like non-binary or women and they know how to grill. Does that make them masculine? Is it physical fitness that makes people masculine? Is the Dalai Lama masculine enough? Like, I don't know. Like, can he get laid? Like, who knows? It's like, what this idea of masculinity. I'm not an expert in this stuff, okay? But it's like, it's an idea. Right? Like, so who is masculine enough? You know who's masculine enough? James Bond. That's about as masculine as you can get. And newsflash, James Bond is a fictional character. Doesn't actually exist. So our standard of masculinity is fictional. So this is what I want you to do. Go out, the next time you go out in public, like go to the grocery store, look around at all of the men. And then like, as you see men, you'll see some of them are in relationships and some of them have children. and then look at how masculine the men who have kids are. And you'll see that there's a wide range of baldness and, dad guts and dad bods and facial hair. And like, some of them are going to like have weak jawlines and like, it's like a whole mishmash of stuff. You can also apply this if you're a woman in this sort of situation. You don't think you're girly enough or feminine enough, right? Like there's all kinds of women out there. So like, be careful about that generalization, because now what you're doing is you're living up to a fiction. You're striving for something. It's like, how do you know if you're masculine enough? Like, what does that mean to be masculine enough? Like, how do you measure it? How are you going to know? It's a feeling. We'll get to where it comes from in a second. You all get that? It's like not a real thing. It's a feeling. The feeling is real. But there's no like masculometer, right? That measures your masculinity. If it's above 7.5, it's whatever. So it's like, I'm not saying there's nothing to the idea of masculinity, but what I'm saying is when it comes to your personal and very real life, aspiring to a fictional ideal is not something that you want to do without thinking about it critically. So I'm not saying that you also can't aspire to be certain things that James Bond is, which is fine, but just be critical about what's the measure that you're going for. Like, what does it mean to be masculine enough? I don't know. Do you? It's like, okay, so let me tell you, if you're watching this video and this resonates with you, chances are you don't know what it means to be masculine enough. All you really know is that you're not it. Y'all get that? That's all you know. You don't know what it means to reach the top of the mountain. All you know is that there's a long way to go. So it's a feeling that's born of an absence, of a lack of something. You all get that? Okay? If this video resonates, I'm saying that the feeling is probably what you have, okay? I think you're plenty masculine, for the record. Second thing, this is really important. So there's a group of women in our Discord, or women and non-binary people, who recently put together a document that was in draft format. I don't know if I was supposed to read it or not, but someone sent it to me. I read it. There was a lot of really great stuff in there. So I'm going to comment on one thing because I think it's a great point to remember. So this concept of what women want, okay? Reading about what women are most attracted to, it makes me wonder if I have those traits. So here's the thing that I want y'all to think about. What women want, it's not like women are like one group of people with a uniform preference for what they want. Do y'all get that? Like, is that clear to people? Because oftentimes when we talk about these kinds of issues, and especially there's people like in the manosphere sort of talk about, they're like, women want this, women want this. Like, women are people. They're just people. And they want different things. Just like you want different things. Like, not all men want the same thing. Not all women want the same thing. Like, humans want individual things. They have individual preferences. Some women will like guys with tattoos. Some women will never date a dude with a tattoo. Does a tattoo make you masculine? People will disagree on that. These are all generalizations. And trying to live your life by a generalization is, generally speaking, a bad idea. So like, people want different stuff. So you're not screwed, because newsflash, people want different stuff. Some people like, and so it sounds like this person, for example, overall, my parents really cared a lot about sharing my emotions, which really helped me a lot with some of my depressed episodes, but I can't really see how those traits are attractive at all to women. So some of the women that I've talked to, when they're talking about what's the most important thing in a partner, they've told me, I want a man who's emotionally available. Heterosexual women. They happen to be. And so what does that mean? Right? So this person sounds like they would be emotionally available, because what they did get good role modeling on is how to be emotionally supportive to someone who's struggling. So there are a lot of people that I know that would really value this. Men or women, both. Non-binary too. Whatever. This is a valuable skill. My point is that, like, if you're trying to figure out, how to sort out your dating stuff, and how to figure out confidence and all this kind of crap. Start by like not generalizing. Right? Because it's just, I don't know, how do you make all women happy? I have enough trouble making a single woman happy. And I understand all of her preferences. And like, that's a challenge. One that I appreciate on a daily basis. Right? But like, I don't know how you're going to attract women. Like, they're not like Pokemon. Right? It's not like, oh, this Pokemon likes orange berries. And it's like, yeah, any Pokemon you see in the world, you can throw an orange berry and they'll be attracted to it. Human beings are not like that. You get that? Like, we get that? Because we don't think that way oftentimes, like in these circles and in these communities. And when our mind gets this way, we sort of think in generalizations. So step number one is stop generalizing, because human beings have individual preferences. And that's good because it gives you hope, right? Because you're not screwed. Because the idea that you're screwed is based on this generalization of like, I'm not masculine enough, and women want this, this, and this. Okay? Because once again, go to the grocery store and look who's got kids. A lot of the people who have kids are not going to be the Mark Manson ideal. I don't even know what the Mark Manson ideal is. Right? All kind of people have kids. All kind of people are in relationships. Okay? That's number one. Don't generalize. Okay. Point number two to understand if you're in this situation. You are not doomed by your parents. So a lot of times people who really struggle to find relationships grow up in situations where they don't have proper role models, or what they view as proper role models, right? Case in point. So we saw that in this post where the person was like, my dad is everything that is the antithesis of what I consider to be a man. And it's like, wow, dude, that's rough. Okay? Some issues there, but let's just accept it at face value. And just because your dad is a certain way doesn't mean you're going to be that way. So this is where, like, this is something I want y'all to understand. If you were dealt a hand in life that gives you poor opportunities going forward, like if you don't have, a lot of inborn good role modeling and stuff like that, that just means that you need to be patient with yourself. Because what I see from this person is that they think about it critically. They're reaching out for help. They're reading Atomic Habits. They're moving from one college to another. They're transferring schools so that they can practice their social skills. All of these kinds of things. So basically, if you think about your role models, that's what you were born with. That's your karma. You don't get to choose that. It's your starting zone. It's your spawn point. So if you get a good spawn point, you can build up pretty quick. So maybe by the time you're 20 years old, if you've got really good role models and stuff like that, you had your first girlfriend when you were 15, second girlfriend when you were 17, and then by 20, you're really comfortable with relationships. If you had the right starting point. Or you had a starting point like mine, which is no girls, no talking, no parties, no going to dances, none of that. You should do studies, right? If you're from like the South Asian diaspora and you're a first generation immigrant in the US or UK or parts of Europe, Canada, whatever, it's like, no dating, no dating, no dating. Why aren't you married yet? Why don't you have kids? What the hell is wrong with you? It's like, you turn 25 or you turn 26, it's getting close to beta, why aren't you married? So you got to be patient with yourself, because here's the thing. Even if you didn't have it when you spawned, you can absolutely get it, right? So if it's like, if you're playing Civilization and you spawn somewhere and there's no good place to start a city, you got to move until you find some floodplains. You feel me, bro? And so like, here's the thing, like someone else who spawned next to the floodplains gets to start their city on turn 1. Epic start. I have to move around for 12 turns. And I start my city on turn 12. That feels bad, man. Y'all get that? So be patient with yourself. Just because you weren't gifted these kinds of advantages by your parents does not mean you're screwed forever. It just means you can't follow the timeline of someone who started this city on turn 1. So you can't compare yourself to someone who's like had 3 relationships by the age of 20, because like you weren't given that opportunity. So you're just starting late It's okay. It's not over forever. In fact, catching up is actually way easier than you think. It's similar to this mechanic they have in Civ, where if you're the first Civ that researches a tech, right, all the subsequent Civs have a bonus to research that tech. It's kind of how it works. Catching up actually takes less time than being at the front of the pack. And if you're doing this stuff like reading books about it and thinking about it and working on it and all that kind of stuff, then you'll catch up real quick. Don't worry. But be patient with yourself, okay? If you think you're doomed because of your spawn point, your parents, be patient with yourself. Point number 2. Point number 3. This is really important. So when we start to objectify the people that we date and we start to think that they have uniform preferences, right? So if you're a woman and you're heterosexual and you're attracted to men and you're like, all men want this. And if you're a dude and you're attracted to women, you're heterosexual, you're like, all women want this. And if you're homosexual and you think the same thing, all men or women want this, like that's not true. So then the problem is that we got to be careful, because then a lot of what we try to do is impress the opposite sex, right? Oh, if all women want this, then I have to become this if I ever want to be in a relationship. So you put on your chameleon skin and you change color and you try to impress women. You try to become that which they want. And that's like, it's kind of weird because you're almost assuming that there's like it's like logic where it's like, if I do A, B, and C, the women will come. And there may be a certain truth to that. Like, I don't think so for the most part. There may be parts of that have some amount of scientific support, right? In terms of, we're going to get to that in a second. But in essence, what I would say is don't try to impress others. Try to impress yourself. So when people say work on yourself, like this is where like, I don't think you should go to the gym necessarily to make yourself attractive to more women. I would say, like, if I look at this sentence, here's what I see. It doesn't help that I've been either skinny or fat my entire life, and it's so hard to gain muscle. So I think the biggest reason that you should go to the gym is because you're not okay with the way that you look. Do y'all get that? Like, sure, women may find men who are in shape more attractive. Like, we can sort of do that. I'm sure if we polled a bunch of women, there may be research on this, so there may be some amount of truth to that. I'm not disputing that, but I'm saying that you shouldn't do something in order to make yourself attracted to more women. You should do something for yourself. Does that make sense? Like, this is how you develop confidence. This is important to understand. Because when I do something, if I go to the gym to impress a girl, let's say, and then I go to the gym for a year and I get buff, and then I ask her out and she says no, what happens to my confidence? So I put all this investment for this one particular outcome, and once she says no, what do I stop doing? I stop going to the gym. And I lose confidence. Like, what the hell, man? Do things that impress you. If you are unsatisfied with the way that you look, do something about it. If you are unsatisfied with your social skills, do something about it. If you are unsatisfied with your professional life, do something about it. If you are unsatisfied with your emotional well-being and your emotional state and how sensitive you are and how much your emotions control your behaviors and thoughts, do something about it. But do it for yourself. Will that, generally speaking, make you more attractive to the people that you want to date? Probably. But don't do it for them. Do it for you. Because this is really important to understand. Like, the value here, and this is where, like, when I sort of think about where successful relationships come from, I think about people who sort of, like, are the best version of themselves. And what you do is you put that on display. You don't try to get someone to like you, right? So that also has a subtle point of, like, removing their choice from the equation. Does that make sense? Like, that person gets to decide if they want to date you or not. It's not like you can do a bunch of stuff and then they'll magically, like, you'll be able to shape their thoughts. Like, it's not what you should try to do anyway. Like, you should be what you are and then put yourself on display. Offer whatever you can to other people. And polish it by all means, right? So like, if I'm selling apples, like I'm going to make sure that I wipe down the apples and make them clean and I'll set them up nicely and stuff like that. So by all means, like advertise, but be what you are, right? And focus on first of all, like impressing yourself. So if there's some kind of deficiency that you've got that you're not happy with, you should work on that 100%. And that's what it means to work on yourself, right? And this is not where like, it's not like working on yourself will magically like make a woman appear and then it's like, boom, girlfriend, right? Working on yourself is for yourself. And then like, as you become confident, hopefully you'll end up being more attractive to women, or you will allow yourself to be put on display instead of so stuck in your head or whatever. And then other people will be attracted to you. But it's kind of weird because it's one of these things where it's like the goal that you're looking for is not the goal that you should work for. You should kind of change your goal to be really focused on yourself. And that's why, like, if you're unhappy with yourself, do something about it for you and learn self-love. And once you like understand self-love and like, you know how to do it, you can show other people how to do it too. Does that make sense? People with me? So don't try to impress other people. Like, try to impress yourself. Be happy with the person that you are and work towards being happy with the person that you are. Next thing that we got to talk about is confidence. So this is important to understand. Confidence, oftentimes people think that confidence comes from success. So if all you've had is success, you don't wind up with confidence. What you wind up with is either ego or, more commonly, imposter syndrome. So I've seen this a lot. Confidence actually comes from surviving failure. Right? So just think about that for a second. Because confidence actually comes from adversity, not from successes. Right? So like, does confidence come from an easy life? Like you can sort of get false confidence from an easy life, but real confidence, real belief in yourself comes from surviving failure, not succeeding. And it's as simple as this. I don't know if y'all have ever seen a kid learning how to walk. But like, you know, when a kid is learning how to walk or learning how to swim, so like I've seen this a lot in terms of, you know, like teaching kids how to swim. They're terrified of water, as they should be. That's like a biological fear because water is a dangerous place. Human beings are not born with the natural ability to swim like many animals, like a fish, right? Fish aren't afraid of water. So confidence comes from like, you know, being put in the water and then the kid is like, ah, and then they survive. And they're like, oh, actually, this is pretty cool. Let's do it. So in terms of dating and stuff like that, confidence in dating comes from actually surviving rejection, right? Or like facing challenges, dealing with challenges. It's not from like having a problem-free relationship. It's all from like being able to recognize that if I have a problem in a relationship, conflict resolution. Once I become confident in conflict resolution, then I will be confident in a relationship. Right? So this is where, like, from a gaming analogy wise, like, confidence is not an evasion tank, it's a healer. Which one's more reliable? Like, I can evasion a tank. Yeah, I've got 90% evasion, but it's a one-hit KO. Like, that ain't how you get confident. Confident is a bunch of armor and a healer behind you who's dedicated. You're going to hold aggro. You're going to take damage, but you know that healer is there. So this is where, like, a lot of people don't realize that when they feel like they don't have any confidence, it's actually being built within you. This is what confidence looks like. Why am I confident in myself? Because I failed. One of the biggest lessons I learned. I failed so much and for so many years. Got rejected from medical school 120 times for one acceptance. And then when I started, I was like, ain't no one going to take this away. I don't care. Surgeons can be assholes to me. Not a problem. I have to survive this rotation for 3 months. I have to deal with this narcissistic ass for 3 months. And then I never have to talk to this person again. Meanwhile, many of my colleagues who were, awesome people, they never really failed, right? Because most kids in med school have never really failed. They're like 4.0s, straight A's all the time, top of their class. And then suddenly, this is one of the cruelest things. One of my friends went to Harvard Law School, and I asked him, how are you enjoying how's your first year? And he's like, it's kind of rough. And I was like, oh, really? I'm so surprised. Like, why is that? And he said, one of the cruelest things you can do to a group of people who have been the best their entire life is to suddenly make them average. I was like, damn. Brilliant guy. So confidence comes from surviving fear. Last thing that we're going to talk about is I would ask yourself a question. And this is going to run to the crux of why this is so hard for people. So I can say, be confident, work on yourself. All this advice that people have heard time and time and time again. And some of y'all do it. You try it. Right? You're like, okay, I'm going to work on myself. I'm going to focus on myself. I'm going to be confident. And you do it and you do it, and it doesn't work and it doesn't work and it doesn't work and it doesn't work. And then you're like, I don't understand. I'm doing everything right and it's not working. And the more resentful you become, the more you go to like the darker sides of like the internet and perceptions around gender dynamics and all that kind of stuff. As the resentment builds up, as the frustration builds up, you go into the dark side. You become a Sith. You leave the light behind. To avoid that, you need to do one thing, and this is the hardest thing to do. It's the thing that I've never heard anyone say. So this is important. You need to ask yourself one question. If I improve in this dimension, will I feel proud of myself? Can I take pride in the way that I move forward? So I want to give you all an example. You guys want to understand this? We're going to show it to you real quick. Do you think this person is proud of themselves? This person has never talked to women. They're getting on dating apps. They're transferring schools. They're reading Atomic Habits. They're reading this. Does this person have things to be proud of? Do they feel proud of themselves? Of course not. Do they have things to be proud of? 100%. Look at this. This is fantastic. They're making geographical changes in their life to correct for a lack of experience they had in the first 20 years of their life. Do you think this person feels proud of themselves? Of course not. Turns out the person is emotionally available and knows how to support people who are struggling. Like, that's good. Never had athletic hobbies, interested in nerdy stuff. Are they proud of this? No. Studying computer engineering, maybe they're good at it. Maybe they really like it. Maybe they're going to be making plenty of money a few years from now. So if you actually improved, could you be proud of yourself? And if the answer to that question is no, that's a huge problem. Because that question being no is the crux of why you can't be confident in yourself. Do y'all understand that? Does that make sense? Because even the progress that you make, the very things that are supposed to make you confident don't make you confident. That's devastating. So as you go trying and trying and trying, because everyone's like, oh my God, like do all this stuff, you'll be confident, you'll be confident, you'll be confident, and it never comes. And now you feel more resentful because you've made so many sacrifices. I moved, I did this, I read this book, I did all these things. I'm working so hard and none of it is working. And that's because you're looking at the outside. You're not looking at what in here prevents you from being proud of yourself. So ask yourself this question. If I went to the gym for a week, could I be proud of myself? Because think about this, right? If you ask yourself that question, of course the answer is yes. Like, of course you should be proud of yourself. And then people go to the gym for a week, and how do they feel about themselves? Tired, ashamed. Oh my God, I'm so out of shape. And now we see the crux of the problem, which is the very medicine that you take makes you nauseous and vomit. And then what are you supposed to do? You have to be able to take pride in your actions, regardless of the result. You got to be able to say to yourself, you know what? Like, even though I'm out of shape, I went 3 days this week. That's something I can be proud of. Because here's the thing, the success, the confidence, use whatever generally positive word you want. That comes from doing the stuff. But as long as your mind isn't able to see it, like, you're going to be screwed, because the very thing that you need is making you nauseous. The medicine is the sickness. And when medicine starts making you sick, you're screwed. That's where you've really got to tunnel down. And you've got to ask yourself, why the hell not? What is it about me? Like, why can't I take pride in this? You've got to get to the bottom of that. Because what you're going to find is it's a feeling that keeps you from doing it. There's a roadblock to you building confidence. Everyone will give you, myself included, 1,000 techniques to build confidence. But no one will ever say, this is what gets in the way, right? Even if you do all the right things. It's the internal work that's the most important. So you've got to ask yourself, if I do this thing, will I be able to take pride in myself? If the answer is why the hell not, that's what you got to start with. Last thing to think about. So for this particular person, one other thing you can do, right? So this person's dad is the most sensitive person you know and the polar opposite of what I see in a man. So one last tip, very concrete. For this person alone, maybe this applies to you if you're listening. Ask your mom, because, hey, look, here's the thing you got to realize about your dad. For being the polar opposite of a man, this dude got laid. This dude sounds like got married. We're not sure that the parents are married, right? So, like, maybe what you should do is ask them, right? Ask your mom. Hey, by the way, can you help me understand why you got together with dad? Like, what happened there? You don't get that? Like, seriously. Right? So here's the thing, like, don't worry about these, like, ask them. Right? To ask your mom. All right, questions before we meditate. Okay, so there are a couple good questions here. One is, so I wouldn't ask your dad, how did you get laid? I would talk to your mom. So once again, open-ended questions, okay? So it's important how you ask these things. You can talk to mom and you can say, hey, can you tell me a little bit about when you and dad first met and how y'all got together and and things like that. Like, can you help me understand how your relationship has changed over time? Right? Have y'all changed? So I wouldn't ask something like, even though sort of what you want to get to at some point is dad always been like this, but it's possible that he wasn't like this. You can also share with your parents, because it sounds like they are emotionally supportive. You can sort of share with them, hey, I feel really anxious about my own dating life. Like, what do y'all think about that? I'm concerned that I'm not masculine enough. What do you think about that? You can talk to them about it. Dolstar93, I'm on the night shift and really appreciate the late stream. You're most welcome. So someone's asking, should we change goals to focus around actions and do more towards confidence? That's something that we've been saying for a long time. So I think that generally speaking, goals should be framed. So we've got a series on YouTube that's goal setting and motivation, which is actually one of our, it's a coaching curriculum that we actually live streamed. So we put together a goal setting and motivation curriculum for our coaching program. So we were literally teaching our coaches, how do you get a client to set the right goals and find the motivation to actually accomplish them? And so we actually, that whole curriculum was streamed and is on YouTube. So y'all can watch the curriculum. Now, the thing to remember there is that you can watch the curriculum, but generally speaking, it's hard to do this stuff, like sometimes on your own, right? So like, this is where it's hard to, so when you ask yourself the questions, like, so here's a good example. Like today I said, ask yourself the question, why can't I take pride in this? That's the kind of thing that you can get to the bottom of that through introspection. But having someone else like pay attention to things and ask you and sort of connect the dots and stuff like that, like that's going to be easy for someone to do externally. So even if we look at the way that we kind of analyze this post, right? So I'll give you all just an example. So this person, by the way, is not uncommon as a client in our coaching program in terms of the kind of person that we help. The key thing is that a lot of our clients come in and problems, right? But what they don't realize is like, actually, like this is pretty epic. So if you think about, what is the role of an external person? The role of the external person is to point this out to you. And this is like, if y'all were watching this, you'll sort of get that aha moment when I point it out. You'll get this aha moment where it's like, hey, wait a second, your dad got laid. It's like you never thought about it that way, right? So y'all can watch the goal setting and motivation stuff. It'll teach you about how to set appropriate goals. We have we have a more advanced version of this that's designed for y'all, so it's more like for our community in Dr. K's Guide to ADHD and Doing Stuff. But there's a 4-hour set, 4 hours of lectures that are available on YouTube. And if this is the kind of stuff that like, you can do this stuff on your own, but it's the kind of thing where like it just really, really helps to have someone else paying attention to your cognitive biases and kind of pointing them out to you and questioning where they come from. And that's why we actually decided to have stuff in addition to streams, right? So like I can answer questions. The problem is that like, as I point these things out, maybe you can realize some of this stuff, but there's no substitute because I can't get to everyone, right? I can't do this for everyone. And like, even like we used to do a bunch of interviews which was like 2 hours with one person, which is like, we can only get to one set of issues. And the more we tunnel down with that person, the more helpful it is for that person, but the less applicable it becomes for everyone else. Does that make sense? So the whole reason that we sort of went with a coaching program is because like this process of pointing out your cognitive biases, recognizing your thinking, recognizing actually that you do have a lot to be proud of, it gets buried in our mind, and sometimes you need someone else to bring it out. Now, so one of the things that we do teach our coaches, which, like I said, you can watch our educational curriculum for coaches. And if that kind of stuff appeals to you, then I definitely sign up for coaching. But if you're interested in just what we teach the coaches, check out the goal setting and motivation seminar on YouTube. And we'll talk a lot about things like the 25% rule and stuff like that. So for example, this is also covered in the guide, but basically if we think about goals, right? So when we set a goal based on our target, right? Like I want to lose 20 pounds. So when you set a goal to lose 20 pounds and you lose a single pound, what does that do for your motivation? What do y'all think? Right? So some people are saying increases it. Most people are saying goes down, kills it, decreases it. You've made progress and your motivation goes down. Right? For a lot of people. Not saying everyone. Some people are able to see the progress. The whole point is that some people aren't. Some people are like, oh my God, I'm working so hard and all I have to show for it is losing a single pound. Right? So this is something simple where we'll sort of teach coaches to use the 25% rule, which is something that we actually started with parents. So, we discovered this rule in parents. And I'll tell y'all, this is me looking out for y'all. So parents are like, my kid is addicted to video games. He plays way too much Call of Duty. How much Call of Duty do you want him to play? Like, what's an appropriate amount? And they're like, he plays 30 hours a week right now. An appropriate amount is 2 hours a week. 2 hours on one weekend day. That would be good. And so what we tell the parents is like, that's way too ambitious. What you need to do is take that goal, cut it in half. Take where you are and where you want to go. Find the midpoint. They're like, that's where we start? No. Take that point and where you are and find the midpoint. That's where you start. So he plays 30 hours a week, plays about 4 hours a day. Let's start by actually just getting him to not play one day. Let's start there. Just 1 day a week with no Call of Duty. And so the interesting thing is that when you make the goal small, it becomes more achievable. Interestingly enough, there's this weird paradoxical thing where progress actually decreases your motivation, which is not what we want. Which is exactly what it does, because our mind is kind of effed that way. So understand these kinds of things. These are the sorts of things that we teach our coaches. Now y'all can learn this stuff too. So I do think it's more efficient to work with another person because you sometimes just can't see your own cognitive biases, which is like tricky. That's why we have professionals, right? So if you're suffering from clinical stuff, like I definitely recommend don't sign up for coaching. Go see a therapist or a psychiatrist or mental health professional, right? So if you've got like clinical depression or you're bipolar or have like generalized anxiety disorder or something like that. If you're like, wait, I don't know if I've got generalized anxiety disorder or not, then go see a clinician. If your focus is on understanding yourself, achieving your goals, focusing on motivation and things like that, coaching's better. But if you're like depressed or super anxious or having panic attacks or like things like that, like definitely go see a clinician. So if someone says, what if the doctor doesn't believe me? So two things you can do. You can ask the doctor, can you help me understand why you don't believe me? What's up with that? Or you can seek a second opinion. And you can seek a second opinion. So why does progress decrease motivation? Progress only decreases motivation if the goal is too far. Does that make sense? So if I'm climbing to the top of Mount Everest and I take 5 steps, my mind does not, this is all explained in the new guide that we've got coming out, and including techniques and what to do about it and all this kind of stuff, but I'll just explain it here. So our mind has a vague sense of progress, and it knows, our mind is efficient. So why does our motivation decrease? So the question, let me just start from the top. Why does our motivation decrease despite making progress? That's the question. So the answer is because our mind, our brain is essentially an efficient organ. So it does things the most efficiently. So this is why, for example, children will naturally learn how to skip, because at a certain age with sort of density of bones and things like that and weight, one of the most efficient ways of getting from point A to point B isn't walking, isn't running, but it's actually skipping. So our brain is really efficient. It doesn't waste energy, okay? Because it doesn't waste energy, it sort of knows what your goal is, and then it sees essentially no progress. So if my goal is to climb Mount Everest and I take 5 steps forward, can I see any measurable progress? What percentage of the way am I? So the brain feels every bit of energy that you spend, right? Because every dollar you spend, you feel. But if you don't make progress that your brain can appreciate, then it's going to tell you to stop spending money or stop walking. If you go to the gym and you're completely out of shape and you go for 1 week and you still feel out of shape and your weight hasn't changed at all, your brain will be like, why are we bothering? This is so painful. We're struggling so much. We're so anxious. People at the gym are looking at us because we're so out of shape and we're not even losing weight. Give up. It's not worth it. Then your brain starts working against you. That's what it's supposed to do. It's not really working against you. It's actually trying to work for you as best as it can. It's saying, hey, this is your goal. This ain't working. We're not seeing any progress. That's why it does that. Someone's asking, should I try to take pride in skills that I feel like I've learned out of necessity? Self-teaching, for example. I don't think much of these skills, but others compliment me on them, and I feel like I should take more pride in them. You should start by understanding why it's hard for you to take pride in them, which you sort of answered in the question, right? You said, I learned out of necessity. So you feel like you don't deserve their compliments because you had no choice in the matter. So that's okay, but I would tunnel down into that. And I think you can also acknowledge that you were given certain... So I'd say you don't necessarily have to take pride, but there's all kinds of work to be done there, okay? So one is you have to figure out why you can't take pride, like what makes it hard for you to take pride. Secondly, how does it feel when people compliment you? Can you acknowledge that you are good at something and even above average and are exceptional at something and still not take pride in it? Can you at least own that you're awesome without necessarily feeling proud of it? Can you experience gratitude? Can you sort of acknowledge that, oh my God, I'm so accomplished at this, and I'm grateful that I had the opportunity and circumstances to learn it? I think all that stuff is super healthy for you to do. Okay, let's meditate. Oh, Shadrach too. So welcome from Australia, my friend. Yeah, we try to, we've got a fair number of people who follow us from down under. Hopefully that's not offensive. And we love having you in the community. I'd love to visit sometime. It'd be awesome to do a down under meetup. And welcome. Okay, so let's do a meditation. We wanted to do a slightly longer meditation today. So we're going to do a meditation around, it's going to be sort of like a yoga nidra meditation. And it's going to be a little bit oriented towards self-love, compassion, pride, lack thereof, etc. Okay? So what I want you all to do is, depending on where you are, you can do the appropriate thing. This is a meditation that's actually designed to help people prepare for sleep. So you don't want to fall asleep during the meditation. You're not really going to be sleepy, potentially, at the end of the meditation, which is okay. So yoga nidra is not something that you usually want to do right before sleep, but I'd say it's something that you want to do about half an hour to 45 minutes before you fall asleep. It's a good way to sort of process your emotions and wind down for the day, and hopefully do a little bit of good emotional work, okay? So I'm going to start by asking all of y'all to lay down on the ground, ideally, but you can lay down on a sofa or something if you want to. We don't really want to use a bed because a bed we want to associate with sleep, and we're not going to be sleeping. So let's lay down on the ground. And I want you to lay down on your back, you animal, flopping down on your belly. And put your hands, palms up, by your sides, arms straight, legs straight. Let your feet kind of fall out to the outside. And just take a moment to relax into the ground. Deep breath in and out. In and out. In and out. Now we'll begin the practice of Yoga Nidra. Yoga Nidra means yogic sleep. And so we'll go through a period of progressive muscle relaxation, followed by entering a meditative state where we'll focus on compassion and healthy self-talk. So we're going to start by curling our toes. Curl, 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 and relax. Continue to breathe. And now take a deep breath in, and we're going to curl our toes and then tighten our ankles. Toes and ankles, toes and ankles. Tighten both of those things and relax. So what we're going to do is gradually tighten more and more of our body with a single breath. And then we'll relax as we exhale. So now take a deep breath in, curl toes, ankles, and flex your calves. Toes, ankles, calves, feel the heat, feel the energy. Hold it, hold it, hold it, and breathe out. Relax. So as I direct you, tighten on the inhale and hold the breath, and then exhale and release. Take a deep breath in, toes, ankles, calves, and then lock knees, lock your knees, lock your knees. So the lower part of your leg is tight, tight, warm, hot, and relax. Exhale. Deep breath in, toes, ankles, calves, knees, and now the thighs. Thighs, 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 knees, ankles, calves, toes, all curling, 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 and relax. Take a moment just to breathe. Feel the residual energy in your legs. Feel how nice it is. And now we'll begin. Take a deep breath in. Toes, ankles, calves, knees, thighs, and now buttocks or the gluteal region. Clench, 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 clench. Tighten, 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 and relax. And now deep breath in. toes, ankles, calves, knees, thighs, buttocks, and now make fists, 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 and all of that should be tight, and relax. Just take one moment to breathe. And now we'll resume. Take a deep breath in. Toes, ankles, calves, knees, thighs, buttocks, fists, and now twist forearms. Twist, 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 and relax. Deep breath in. Toes, ankles, calves, knees, thighs, buttocks, fists, forearms, and now curl your biceps, curl your arms up, tighten the bicep, tighten the bicep, tighten, 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 and relax. Let your arms rest by your side, palms face up. Deep breath. In and out. Now we'll begin again. Deep breath in. Toes, ankles, calves, knees, thighs, buttocks, fists, forearms, biceps, and now the abdomen. Clench the abdomen, tighten your abs, tighten, 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 and relax. Feel how good it is to just breathe. And once again, deep breath in. Toes, ankles, calves, knees, thighs, buttocks, fists, forearms, biceps, abdomen, and then tighten your chest. Tighten the muscles of your chest. Tighten, 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 and relax. Deep breath in. Toes, ankles, calves, knees, thighs, buttocks, fists, forearms, biceps, abdomen, chest, and then clench your throat. Clench the throat, clench the throat, and relax. Deep breath in. Toes, ankles, calves, knees, thighs, buttocks, fists, forearms, biceps, abdomen, chest, throat, and then tighten your jaw. Clench down gently but persistently. Tighten, 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 and relax. Take a moment to breathe. And now begin again. Deep breath in. Toes, ankles, calves, knees, thighs, buttocks, fists, forearms, biceps, abdomen, chest, throat. Clench your jaw and then squeeze your eyes tight. Squeeze your forehead and eyes tight, 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 and breathe out and relax. And now we're going to go for a whole body contraction. Take a deep breath in. Toes, ankles, calves, knees, thighs, buttocks, fists, forearms, biceps, abdomen, chest, throat, jaw, eyes, and forehead. Whole body relaxation. Feel all of that energy, that power within you. Feel it clench tighter, tighter, tighter. Hold it, hold it, hold it, hold it, hold it. Hold your breath. Hold it and out. Let go. Sink and float. And once again, into the breach. Whole body contraction, one muscle group at a time. Deep breath in, toes, ankles, calves, knees, thighs, buttocks, fists, forearms, biceps, abdomen, chest, throat, jaw, eyes, forehead, whole body contraction. Feel the energy, the power, the heat, the life within you as you summon it, bring it forward. Feel that heat, that energy, that power. Hold it, hold it, hold it, and out. Drift. Float. And one last time, prepare yourself. Slow, deep breath in. As you breathe in, start with the toes, the ankles, the calves, the knees, the thighs, buttocks, fists, forearms, biceps, abdomen, chest, throat, jaw, eyes, forehead. Complete contraction of your entire body. Feel that energy, that heat, that power, that Shakti. This is the energy of life within you as you hold your breath and contract, summon it up, feel it, and cover your entire body. It's almost too much to handle. And out. And now become light as air. And now appreciate who you are. The peace that you feel in this moment. Drifting, floating. And along with the peace, contrast that with the energy that you feel, the energy that you were able to summon, the unadulterated heat, power, perfection. Both of these states are your birthright. You are human, and with this power of consciousness, you can summon up an infinite well of energy. You could feel it, the intensity, the warmth, as well as the coolness, the drifting, the floating. And buried in these two states, so different, such different intensities of experience, relaxation, the common thread, which is you. You summon both of these things, and they answer your call. That tiny thread that is you. Not your mind, but your consciousness. And now turn your attention to your mind and notice how at times it suffers. It gets buffeted back and forth by the miseries of life. Its perception of you inadequate. It notices your mistakes. It feels guilty. It feels shame. It also feels joy and pride at times. But that's just the perception of your mind. For the last few minutes, you have been centered securely in the self. The part of you that is both most perfect and also most true. The part of you that transcends worry, transcends fear. So this part of you can be a source of sunshine, a source of energy, a source of support. That the peace you felt for these few moments is vast, and the energy that you have to give is endless. And so whatever the troubles of the ego or the mind, the self will always be there to support you. Take solace in this. And recognize that while you have work yet to do, you will absolutely be able to do it. The road is still long. You still have some suffering ahead of you, but so be it. Know that there is a part of you that you maybe hopefully caught a glimpse of, or maybe sat with for some time today, that is perfect and will always be in your corner no matter what. Ground yourself in that thought. Hold on to a fraction of the energy and the peace and bring it with you into your mind. Have compassion towards yourself, towards your mind. Recognize that that spark of divinity within you will have an endless amount of peace and patience for any of the mistakes that you make. like an encouraging friend, it'll help you get back up. And it'll also tell you to try again. So take these feelings of peace and energy and translate them into words to take with you from this practice. The unadulterated experience is not something the mind will be able to understand. So you have to translate it. You have to speak its language. Phrases like, it's okay, try again. Phrases like, no one's perfect the first time around. Phrases like, you'll get there one day. Phrases like, despite what's happened, I'm proud of you. All of these phrases are born out of these two core feelings within the self, peace and energy. So whichever phrase resonates with you is the one that you will carry with you out of this practice. I'm doing okay. I deserve to be whole. And now with your eyes closed, slowly sit up. You can adopt a meditative posture, sitting cross-legged with your back straight, or something like half lotus, Ardha Padmasana, or lotus Padmasana if you can do that, or Vajrasana. Put your palms together. If you don't know what that means, no big deal. You'll learn, right? Be patient with yourself. And it is time to learn. Eyes still closed. Put your hands together in front of you in Namaste position. Bow your head and offer thanks. It's not so much about who you offer the thanks to. Just feel the gratitude for these past few moments. That on this random Tuesday night, July 5th, for a few moments you were able to connect with that part of yourself and offer gratitude. Take a deep breath in, relax your hands, and slowly open your eyes. Code Monkey's asking, is it normal to be out of breath after the contractions? 100%. That's why we hold the contraction. For those of you who are on Wednesday, July 6th. Okay, so I know people are getting all kinds of different things. So some senpai is saying, thank you, that was intense. You're going to hate. Interesting name. Is saying, I'm tearing up, thank you. It's my birthday. Damn, I cried. The wiener butt. I think I saw the light during contractions, Omega lol. So I'd say my favorite part of meditating on Twitch is the contrast between the name of the Twitch user and the profound statement that they make about their meditative experience. The wiener butt saw a light during the contractions. So Kiko Brielle also cried. Okay to cry. All kinds of stuff comes out. Okay, it seems like a lot of people are crying. Champer, 13. Tian Yu Hao is also crying. So Unknown had a weird reaction where water is coming out of their eyes. So Shaka Shocker is saying that was nice, tough but nice. Yeah, so meditation isn't always supposed to be easy. And I like these meditations. You know, some meditations are hard because you're not doing anything. This meditation is hard because you're doing a lot. And for some people, you need that intensity. You know, like you need, like, it's got to be hard. It's like, got to be hardcore. It's like you can't do the AFK meditation. The AFK just feels like too AFK. Like, oh, like notice your breath. Notice your breath. Notice. I'm tired of noticing. Let's do something. Okay, cool. So someone's headache went away. That's good. I don't know if that's reliable, but I'm happy to hear that. Tawak is asking, were we supposed to point or flex the foot? Doesn't really matter, whichever one you want to do. So there's other versions of this where you can also do like opposite muscle groups. So we focused on biceps, but you can do triceps. Another good thing that y'all can try if you want to mix it up a little bit is have your clavicles touch, right? So instead of contracting the chest, you can contract the back. Yeah, so Gugly Wubbins is saying, I joined halfway through it. I'm still exhausted. Awesome. Good. Like what a proper meditation is supposed to do is exhaust you. So here's the thing. I don't know if this would kind of make sense, but like no one's saying they're sleepy, right? So this meditation, the cool thing is it's kind of exhausting, right? Which is like weird. Like you think that like a meditation before sleep should be relaxing. No, like we're going to exhaust you, but like peacefully exhaust you, right? It doesn't ramp you up. Like the problem with some stuff that exhausts you is that it ramps you up and exhausts you. So Yoga Nidra is cool because it like exhausts you without ramping you up. You just kind of feel like it was intense and you kind of feel owned. And then like, so now go through your bedtime routine and hopefully what'll happen is you'll like have like a really good sleep tonight. Okay. All right. Who are we rating? Who's streaming it this time? Do you feel like meditation can help with chronic illness? Shoxam is asking it. I think yes. So there's even data to support that. By help with chronic illness, I don't know exactly what you mean by help. There are some studies that meditation can have some clinical benefits in terms of particular chronic illnesses. Depending on what the illness is and the quality of the study, that effect is going to be somewhat variable. But I think that even if it doesn't help with the clinical stuff, it'll improve quality of life. So one of my first research projects when I was back from India, I was working with cancer patients. And we had this hypothesis that teaching cancer patients meditation would improve their pain, right? Pain relief. So did our study, and we found that meditation had no impact on pain scores. Cancer hurt just as bad. So we were kind of disappointed, and we asked the research subjects, we were like, well, what's going on? Like, did the meditation not work? And they're like, no, I love it. I do it every day. It helps so much. And we got confused because we were like, but your pain score is the same. They say, yeah, like technically the amount of pain I feel is actually the same. I don't think the pain has gotten better. What meditation has allowed me to do, it feels like there's a window between me and the pain. So the pain doesn't bother me nearly as much as it used to. It used to hurt a lot. The pain is still there, but it just hurts a lot less when I meditate. So I still remember that conversation to this day in terms of truly understanding what meditation does. So there are cases where, meditation will alter hormonal levels and like stress hormones and stuff like that. So you do see clinical benefits in some things. But depending on the condition and depending on the person and stuff like that, your mileage may vary. Still think it's good to do. Research on meditation is like absolutely fascinating. Do I recommend doing this every night? For a while, if you liked it, right? So I think it's really, you're the one who should decide because y'all have tried it now. So I do think it improves with practice. I think so really Yoga Nidra, the real meditation is the state after you're done with the muscle part. The muscle part is just a really good way to get a lot of people to that kind of like calm, weird, floaty, sort of peaceful state. And you just like float in that bathtub of peace for a little while. And the problem is that if you really think about it, we don't really have a time in our day where we get to be at peace. We get to be distracted. We get to be relaxed. We sometimes get to have fun. But we don't get to be at peace. Like, what were you doing there for 5 minutes? You weren't doing anything. Were you bored? No. How is that possible? Like, how does that work? Right? So this is the thing. We like so much of our life is in chasing antidotes to boredom. And we don't realize, and like that's what screws us, right? It's like in the pursuit of antidotes to boredom, we'll do all kinds of stuff and screw ourselves over so bad. Whereas you don't actually need to chase an antidote to boredom. And if you don't need to chase an antidote to boredom, what does that allow for your life, right? If you can cultivate that state of mind, practice it, figure out how to access it without such an intensive meditative practice. Doing things like dishes becomes easier. Doing things like homework becomes easier. Doing all kinds of stuff becomes easier. Okay, Moist is awake? Let's do that then. Let's stream Moist Lord. Snuffy or Moist Lord? Snuffathon day 5. Okay. So I want to say, so people asking me to upload this to YouTube. I don't know if it's going to be uploaded, but 2 things to tell y'all. One is there is a Yoga Nidra meditation on YouTube already, and there's also a Yoga Nidra meditation on Dr. K's guide. So I don't know that we'll upload this particular one. I have no idea. I don't know what gets uploaded to YouTube, when and why and how. But give me 1 second. Okay, we got to go. Take care. Oh, GG.